shaping the Islamic finance world for the better, making it more efficient and accessible to Muslims and non-Muslims alike. This forum isn't just a conference. It's a platform for ideas, a marketplace for innovation, and above all, a gathering of conscience. We will continue to explore how Islamic economic principles can offer not only profitability, but purpose. The ethical foundations of the Islamic economy are rooted in risk-sharing, social justice, and real asset-based finance, one that aligns faith with fairness and belief with bold innovation. On day one of the summit, I had the honor of announcing a great milestone, the formation of the AlBaraka Islamic ESG Index, a platform that has been built to resolve the long-standing tension between Sharia compliance, ESG alignment, and financial performance. Today, the discussions continue with our esteemed experts and array of panels and workshops set to take place over the next couple of hours. On that note, I would like to introduce our first panel of the day, titled Economic Strategies for Sustainable Growth in Islamic Economics, Integrating Principles with Global Practices. Join me in welcoming the moderator of the panel, the member of the Board of Directors of Kuwait Finance House, Mr. Nurur Rahman Abid. Joining Mr. Abid are the Chief Executive Officer at Q Invest, Mr. Hussein Fakhruddin, the Group Chief Executive Officer of MBSB Holding, that comprises MBSB Bank and MIDF Group, Mr. Rara Hanif, and the Director of Compliance and Risk Management, Corporate Secretary at PTBTPN Sharia TBK, Mr. Arifa Ismail. Over to you, Mr. Abid.
Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, respected scholars, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesterday was a very powerful day. I was most impressed with what was presented in speeches, and there were some great messages, particularly for the leaders of the industry and those people who set direction for Islamic banks and what they do. I was most impressed, and it reminded me of a meeting that I had with His Excellency Sheikh Saleh Kamil, Allahu Yarhamu, in late 90s. I was with Ernst & Young, and we had set up a global center of excellence for Islamic banks. And a few weeks later, I got a call from the AlBaraka office in Bahrain that Sheikh Saleh Kamil is in Bahrain and he would like to meet you. So I went to see him. And he had asked for about half an hour, and we were there for the next 2 hours. And he shared with me his dream, his vision for AlBaraka. He said, I want to see my bank as a global bank. Remember, this is 1998, 1999, late 90s. And at that time, Baraka was relatively small. So I have a dream. I want to see it as a global bank. I want to see AlBaraka contribute to the direction of Islamic banking and developments that Islamic banking can achieve, particularly in terms of real economic growth and ethical values that are brought with it. And yesterday, I think I recognized that his dream had been realized by AlBaraka people. So I would offer my sincere congratulations to our AlBaraka team, and particularly Sheikh Yusuf Khalavi and his team who have managed to do this. Having said that, let me introduce this session. It is both an honor and a privilege to be here today to discuss a topic of immense importance: economic strategies for sustainable growth in the context of Islamic economics, integrating principles with global practices. As we face unprecedented global challenges such as high inflation, commodity hikes, climate change, poverty, and inequality, it becomes imperative to explore economic models that not only promote growth, but do so ethically and sustainably. We shall address these topics in this session. There will be 3 presentations followed by Q&A session. And I would like you to participate in that Q&A session because I think you are here, you've come from far, and it is your right to participate in this discussion and raise as many questions as you want, and inshallah we'll give you opportunities. Let me introduce my panelists. On my right, left, first, Hussain Fakhruddin, Chief Executive Officer at Q Invest. He's had 20 years of banking experience, 16 of which are with Q Invest. He has shaped the bank strategy and played a major role in its growth. He led transactions over $20 billion across mergers, acquisitions, private equity, and finance. Next is Mr. Rafe Hanif. Rafe is Group Chief Executive of MBSB Banking Group that comprises MBSB Bank and MIDF Group. He has 26 years of experience, having worked with HSBC, ABN AMRO, Citigroup. It doesn't get any better than that in global names. So well done, Rafe. He was the CEO of HSBC Amana in 2010 before joining CIMB Islamic. Last but not least, Arif Ismail. Arif is the Director of Compliance and Risk and Corporate Secretary of BTPN Sharia, part of SMBC Group. He has more than 35 years of experience. He has worked with the retail and the commercial areas of the bank. He has managed legal, information security, as well as communication, so they've kept you busy. So let us go into these sessions. The first session will be handled by Mr. Hussain, and his topic is Islamic economic resilience and sustainability with the Sustainable Development Goals and ESG strategies. So please, Mr. Hussain.
Thank you very much for your kind words. I think it's very poetic that the investment banker is here to present about economic resilience and sustainability. Usually investment bankers are seen as very aggressive people. However, that speaks loudly about how Islamic banking or Islamic investment banking can marry both worlds, investment banking, asset management, and also SDG and ESG strategies together. So just to start, quickly introduction about who we are. So Q Invest is a Sharia-compliant investment bank set up in 2007. We're based in Qatar. We were among the first Islamic investment banks set up in the Gulf after it became interesting for us to establish investment banks. Our parent is QIB, Qatar Islamic Bank, one of the oldest Islamic banks in the region, founded in 1982. Our core business at Q Invest is basically providing investment banking services, investing our own capital, and managing third-party capital and investing along their side. Of course, all under the guise and the guidance of Sharia-compliant investment. We have a total authorized capital of around 1 billion. Our total assets or assets under management is around 2 billion. And we have done, the bulk of our business has been transacting in global markets rather than in Qatar or in the GCC. And that speaks very loudly about that it's quite successful to do transactions which are Sharia compliant in markets like the US, Europe, UK, and other jurisdictions. I've been with the bank for 16 years. Prior to that, I was in also investment banking between Kuwait and Dubai. Throughout my tenure at Q Invest, we have advised a lot in the capital markets, Sukuks like QIB Sukuks and Dukhan Sukuks, which were recently done this year. And probably we'll also work on a lot of 81s for a lot of the takaful companies and local Sharia compliant banks in the state of Qatar. we were also part of an award-winning transaction that we've done for Ooredoo, which is the telecom operator in Qatar. It was the first airtime Sukuk, which won awards for the concept itself. Going to our subject, and I will try to be as quick as possible. It's very important to understand that Islam or Islamic financing or Sharia compliant investing has been ESG and SDG compliant since 1400 years. It's not something new. It's anchored in through zakat, no riba, and as well with moderate risk aversion, no speculative investment. That gave us basically a roadmap on how we can be ESG before ESG became popular. So it's what is now popular or what is now on everybody's mind, investing in ESG and of course establishing all those frameworks. Islamic financing was doing that way before that was popular. So, and what is very important for us to understand that this is how these two concepts, they are complementing each other. They're not competing. And as a matter of fact, it leaves a huge potential for investing, for Sharia compliant investing or Islamic investment to significantly grow, and we'll go through these throughout the work. Why is it a truly ethical framework for finance? As I said, there is no interest, there's profit sharing, there's no profit maximization, it's equitable profit sharing or spreading the risk among parties. It's been ethical investing, which is very important. Conventional doesn't have any restraints on ethical investment. There is also a very or limited or low level of leverage. No, on the conventional side, the more you put leverage on a structure, the higher the return, the higher you maximize the profit. But that also what got a lot of investors or investment banks or economies into trouble, like the 2008 crisis, excessive leverage and aggressive investing strategies. And of course, ethical sectors. Not all sectors are open for investment, which are very important as from a Sharia compliant perspective, but from a conventional side, the limit is the sky, there is no restrictions. So the framework basically is anchored on financial inclusion, it promotes charity, social economic well-being, and of course, fair distribution of wealth, which is a very popular concept these days. If we go to the next step, which is why there's an overlap compliant or Islamic finance and SDG. For instance, quickly, no poverty, which is aligned with SDG 1. Islamic finance promotes social justice, equal distribution of wealth through waqf or zakat or the sadaqah, thereby reducing poverty. There's also a lot of decent work in economic growth, which is SDG 8. It links Sharia compliant investing is backed by hard assets, which is very important for any sound and stable investing. And of course, through a well-defined profit and loss sharing between all the parties. And it, of course, Sharia compliant encourages productive enterprise where it can be increase the productivity and generates, of course, the jobs that everybody currently is pursuing. Sustainable cities and communities, SDG 13, is also where the asset-backed securities make sure that these transactions have a real purpose, and you're not just betting on bets, for instance, which is very popular in the conventional side. And of course, a very popular topic, which is climate action, promoting projects that help mitigate climate change and protect the environment, such as green sukuk, which I think they are still significantly under focus, and they should become much more prominent as a way of investing wisely under the Sharia compliant structure, but also being protective of the government. And this should be significantly promoted throughout in the future. And how does this protect us from crises, right? So let's take two examples. First one is the 2008 financial crisis. Islamic banks are not highly levered. Most of their structure or the Sukuk investments are asset-backed. However, there is stress, of course, like any financial institutions, you undergo stress during a crisis. But as long as you are able to survive and to continue and to grow, if what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and hence why Islamic banks were prevailed during these crises. In 2020, also during the COVID-19 pandemic, Sharia compliant structuring has helped in promoting, for instance, Sukuk funded healthcare recovery and the zakat and the waqf aided in the aid relief, which was very important for the governments to basically help adapt or face the current pandemic situation, which was unprecedented at the global level. Where does QInvest comes into play? So we are an investment bank, we're an asset manager, but at the same time, we're Sharia compliant, and we need to abide by those rules, especially that it ties up to the Qatar National Vision of 2030. We have done our first successful $275 million sustainability-linked facility. This is the first time done in Qatar for a financial institution, and I think the first time ever to be done for an Islamic investment bank. We're very proud of this transaction because and the banks participating were a global bank at HSBC and local banks in Qatar, international banks who participated, and we really thank them for their trust in QInvest, but also for partaking during this for this unique structure and instrument. And for us, why does it work? Because it provides us with ability to measure and incentivize us to measure what kind of ESG initiative that we are doing and rewards us for these type of performance. So if we exceed what we have said we will do, we will be rewarded by potentially dropping some of our other costs, and our performance will become motivated. So both issuer and investor, and of course all the stakeholders becomes interlinked into, there's a alignment of interest to make sure this continues and succeeds, and we can do more repeat transaction. Of course, these instruments in practice, like the Malaysia COVID-19 Sukuk in 2020, which is the ability to raise capital to basically fund economic recovery during the crisis. Of course, Tabu Haji in Malaysia, the pilgrimage saving funds, which help provide long-term financial resilience for depositors, also fund a pilgrim for the pilgrim in Mecca, the holy site. Of course, raising zakat as an anchor for economic to sustain or to help alleviate economic shocks, if you want to call it, and deploy funds into vulnerable communities and protect them for during the very hard times of COVID-19, when everybody was stuck at home, nobody was going to work. It was very challenging for people to operate and to generate any income. What's the practical implications? I mean, at the end of the day, financial inclusion is through microfinance. This has been done, I think, in Bangladesh successfully. Also, making sure our corporate ethics is run in parallel with the Sharia compliant governance. Of course, having in place zakat, waqf, and qard hasan for distribution of wealth and to help the less favored people and to support vulnerable communities. Also understand how to serve communities who in need of that, but also SMEs, because these are businesses that require support and investing. A couple of examples is Setco Capital, where they integrated the Sharia compliant principle in SG to serve all stakeholders, not only the shareholders, but everybody who revolves around Setco Capital, which is very admirable. Kuwait Finance House, when they embedded Sharia compliant governance through the community support, outdoor focused employee development, which basically led the way for other institutions to adopt the same model, which is very important. As I said, Sukuk investments have been very instrumental in in ethical investing. The sector selection is very important. The structure is very important. Asset back is very important. All that structure helped guide towards investing in Sharia compliant and provide opportunities. Islamic microfinancing in Bangladesh has been very successful, and it's a case study which you can read about. It's been very, very successful in providing microloans to people who need SME support and to grow their business. Of course, AlBaraka Bank report on 2022 ushered the way you can combine financial reporting with social welfare and economic justice, which taking a very, if you want to call it, avant-garde position or a trailblazer in order for all other institutions to adopt the same requirements for a better communication, because that's very important for us as well. Some of these impact examples, of course, are this social justice, married also with SDG goals, Islamic finance oriented versus Islamic performance-based. It's very important for you, for ESG to be successful, or SDG to be successful. You need to take into consideration also the interest of the issuer, the interest of the as well. So it needs to be able to basically marry both those words in order for you to have a sustainable ESG program or sustainable Sharia compliant financing or Islamic financing services. Of course, as I said, they are complementary, not competing framework. This has been done for 1400 years. ESG and SDG are latecomers. However, that does not mean that they have to compete, but as a matter of fact, they can help each other. And finally, in conclusion, Islamic finance offers a very resilient and strong ethical framework. It helped, it's sustained and grew in the environment at the time where there's a lot of stress on financial institutions or on the global markets. It's proven that asset-backed financing, ethical investing, moderate leverage is the right solution to sustain these kind of shocks, which every 10 to 15 years, the whole economic and financial space suffers from these crises, and something that sometimes non-financial, like the COVID-19 pandemic. Strong synergy, of course, between CDGs and ESGs for sustainable future, complementing framework, not competing, which is very important as well. Of course, you need to keep innovating, standardization and global collaboration. These are the key conclusions, if you want, from what you have described. And how we plan to go forward is very important to look at, keep developing the international localized standards, to keep promoting green social initiative, Sukuks and ethical investing. These are very important to help promote both these compacts from Sharia compliant. And of course, bringing in AI, blockchain, digital Islamic banking, which is also very important. And we need to marry the technology to the space. And finally, which is, in my view, is the most important one, regulator and policymakers needs to keep updating the legal economic framework in order to allow these to continue and to proceed. So that's my short presentation. I hope it was informative. I'm happy also to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For a comprehensive presentation, particularly on resilience of Islamic banks and the contributions some Islamic banks have made to development of certain areas and products. However, I would say that as pointed out by many speakers yesterday, there's a lot more that Islamic institutions need to do if you really want to achieve what Islamic banking offers in terms of development, in terms of progress, in terms of poverty alleviation, and particularly industry focused. And it's supposed to be real economy. And I'm hoping in the question and answer sessions, you will have some tough questions from my colleagues here. Rafe, your turn next. And your topic is expanding horizons, strategic approaches for Islamic financial institutions to expand beyond borders. Please.
Thank you. Bismillah. Assalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum and very good morning to everyone. I would like to follow through the first part of the presentation by Brother Hussein, looking at how Islamic banks can expand beyond borders. What are the ingredients that are required to to help Islamic banks who are doing well domestically to go expand beyond borders. So if you look at the current state of economic development in the OIC world, the total population of OIC, the Organization of Islamic Member Countries, it's about 26% of the global population. So we have 26% of the global population residing in OIC world, and we produce about 13% of the GDP, the global GDP, and about 13 to 14% of global trade. So evidentially, we are very productive at home in the OIC world from the number of population we have versus the total output in terms of GDP and trade. And sadly, if you look at the intra-OIC trade within the Muslim countries, we have 57 Muslim countries or member countries, the intra-OIC trade is only 18% of the global trade. And if you look at some of the examples, if you look at the column where you have Malaysia all the way to UAE, these are samples of OIC countries. If you look at Malaysia, Malaysia exports about 313 billion. Indonesia, 258 billion. Saudi Arabia, 321 billion. And Türkiye is about 255 billion. If you look at the 313 billion exported from Malaysia, only 7% is going to the Muslim countries, OIC member countries. Saudi Arabia is only 12%. Türkiye is 7%. Meaning 93% of Turkish exports, goods, are going to non-OIC countries. Then if you look at the imports on the bottom row, if you look at total imports that Malaysia has, 266 billion, only 9% comes from OIC countries. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, 17% come from OIC member countries. Türkiye is only 9%. Then you contrast to the intra-EU trade, 60% of their trade, the EU member trade, is within the EU market. Of course, they have common currency and free of tariffs and other border issues. But even then, 60% is a huge number when it comes to intra-EU trade versus intra-OIC trade flow. Now, why we need to look at the economic complexity? Because this is an index that is compiled by the Harvard Kennedy School to look at the potential for trade development in any particular country. If you look at what this economic complexity index measures, it looks at the diversity of the products exported. So if you have 100 products being exported versus 1,000 products being exported, the country that has got 1,000 products will have a higher weightage, higher score. The second aspect, the measure, is the complexity of the products exported. Diversity, and they call it ubiquity. How ubiquitous is your product? If it is so common, then you have a lower rank. But if it's more sophisticated in terms of production, so less countries can produce it, then you have a higher weightage, higher score. So if you look at the top country in this economic complexity index is Japan. It's about 2.07 rating. Why? Because they produce a lot of goods, and many of the goods are highly complex. Very few countries can replicate these products. In the OIC world, Malaysia happens to have the highest rating, 1.04. It has produced, primary commodities like palm oil, oil and gas. It exports semiconductors. It exports aerospace, electronics and electricals and chemicals and so on. Saudi Arabia is about 0.76 and Türkiye is 0.62, followed by UAE. Some of the countries are even having minus, meaning the diversity is shrinking and the complexity is also shrinking, meaning the products are almost homogeneous. You can buy from any country in the world, therefore they become less competitive. Now, if you look at the trading partners for the OIC world, look at top trading partner for Malaysia, it's China. Indonesia, China. Saudi Arabia, China. Qatar, China. Iran, China. Türkiye is Russia. Pakistan again, China. UAE, China. If you look at this 10 sample countries or 8 sample countries, only Iran and Pakistan seems to be doing some trade. The top 5 trading partners, in Iran's case, is Turkey, probably because of the various sanctions, they don't have many partners to trade with, and Pakistan, due to the low complexity and diversity in terms of the export products, they probably are not able to trade with the bigger trading nations in the world. Look at the EU trade. The intra-EU trade is predominantly within the European and across the Atlantic with the US. In only one instance, two instances, you see China appearing in the top 5 trading partners for Germany and Netherlands, and also Italy. But predominantly the trade within their bloc, and at worst case, they trade with the US as the top trading partners. Look at the FDI inflows. And these are all important data sets that will help guide the Islamic banks to decide whether they should go beyond borders. Because if an Islamic bank wants to go beyond borders to different OIC countries, first there must be trade flow between those countries and the home country. If I'm in Dubai, if I want to go and open an office or bank in Indonesia, is there enough trade flow between Indonesia and UAE for me to facilitate? Why HSBC is present in 60 countries? Why US Citibank is present in 160 countries is because there's enough trade flow. Most banks go in where there is trade flow. From the trade flow, they will then help finance not only the trade, but the development of the trading entities between the two countries. Effectively, they will go from trade finance to corporate banking, and eventually they will do investment banking. So when there's not enough trade flow between the OIC member countries, the economic opportunities, the sustainability of the growth is questionable. So if you look at the FDI flows, Malaysia's top FDI flows comes from Singapore, US, China. Look at Indonesia, Singapore, China, Hong Kong. Saudi Arabia, US, UAE, France. Qatar, Iran, Turkey. But where are the Muslim countries? Say, other than Saudi Arabia, which has got UAE investing in the FDI inflow, the rest, they're all non-OIC countries who are investing in the OIC world. In contrast to EU, you'll see most of the investment comes from that EU bloc. They're helping each other to grow, whereas we are not helping ourselves. We invest outside the OIC world and expect OIC to grow on its own miraculously. And if you look at the trade, I explained earlier, 13% of the global trade volume comes from the OIC world. If you dissect the 13% of the trade flow coming from OIC world, it's dominated by 10 countries. 10 countries in OIC contribute 76.4% of the global trade. Malaysia, Indonesia, Turkey, Saudi, UAE, Qatar, Kazakhstan, Morocco, Egypt, and Iraq. These 10 countries contribute 76%. The remaining 47 countries produce 23.5%. So there is a long, long way for OIC to go before it becomes a global, a powerful bloc in the global scene. So if you look at the data that I presented earlier, because there is not enough intra-OIC trade flow, that's the first weakness. Second, the total OIC global trade output is only 13% of the global trade output. And there's hardly any FDI flow within the OIC world. And 10 countries dominate 76.4% of the OIC trade, means that any bank who wants to grow, any Islamic bank that wants to grow, is very limited scope. So the key trends you see is, if there's a bank in UAE, perhaps they should have a position in Turkey, because there is enough trade flow, and to Malaysia, Indonesia. So there's only 3-4 countries where you can be present, because if you are in Saudi or UAE, you can cover GCC, right? In Malaysia or Indonesia, you can cover the Asia Pacific, and Turkey, you can cover probably the North African region as well as Europe. So at best, the key markets for Islamic banks to grow will be the three hubs, I would call it: Malaysia, Indonesia, or GCC, or Turkey. So that's the key challenges. And you can see from this, most of the banks from the Islamic world, they have a presence in UAE, probably a rep office or a small presence. Whereas in Malaysia, you have banks from Indonesia because we are neighbors. There's a lot of trade flow. And also Saudi bank, Al-Rajhi, is in Malaysia. So there's limited opportunity for Islamic banks to grow beyond their traditional borders. What needs to be done? Number one is to really understand what are the gaps. Why are OIC countries exporting outside OIC? Are there opportunities to trade between? So there must be a database. I think the OIC has got a committee called COMSAC. COMSAC is coming up with a framework called the TPS, Trade Preferential System, to facilitate more trade. We are currently about 18% intra-OIC trade. The target is to grow to 25% in 2025. I don't think it's happening, unfortunately. So what needs to be done is to first remove any tariff barriers to make sure that there is a free flow of trade between the 57 OIC member countries. That's the first one. Number two is to have a gap analysis. If Indonesia is exporting outside the OIC world, can we find home in the OIC world? Can Indonesia export more to OIC world? And can let's say Indonesia is importing from Europe, can we find opportunities for Indonesia to import from Turkey? A lot of the companies in Turkey, they are producing these goods on an OEM basis to be labeled in Europe and sent to Indonesia, for example. Why can't Indonesia, Malaysia come straight to Turkey? There must be a database that shows the gaps between the OIC member countries and find matches, what we call business matchmaking between, I think this is what AlBaraka Group is trying to do now. I was told by the group CEO they have a database that is reflective of the trade gaps in the 11 countries they are present. So maybe that could be a model to expand. In MBSB, we are working with a large group, banking group called Santander in Europe, to help be part of their market, because they're not present in Malaysia. We want to be part of their trade platform or trade network to connect Malaysia to 30 markets where they operate in. The third one is to remove non-tariff barriers. Like, for example, many countries have got import license, export restrictions, quota on imports, right? And non-tariff measures, halal standards. If you want to sell something to another country, then the scholars from that country will say, look, Malaysian halal standard may not be acceptable in that country's halal standard. And for an exporter, it costs money to get halal certification again. So Malaysia has worked with 88 countries. So JAKIM's halal standard today is accepted as a reciprocal certification in 88 countries. So more needs to be done across non-tariff measures, which, for example, pre-shipment inspection, sanitary requirements, and many other public and public safety and health issues that needs to be synchronized between the OIC world. And lastly is the trade promotion activities. We need to do more trade fairs, need to have more trade facilitation through banks. So like, for example, we have One World Alliance for airlines. So I took Malaysian airline to Doha, Qatar Airways to Istanbul, and then going back with Turkish airline. So I'm taking 3 airlines, but I bought the ticket with Malaysian Airlines, right? So can we have a company that is selling to UAE, from UAE to Morocco, being funded by 3 banks, but under an alliance, like One World Islamic Banking Alliance, so that you can have within the banks, credit limits that you can then facilitate and help the trade to grow. So lastly, the opportunities. We have a huge population, 26% of the world population. And I'm sure if you correctly count, we'll probably be 33%. I'm sure a lot of people are missing when they do the census. So we can see our population is growing. There's a lot of resource abundance. There's no shortage. If you look at oil and gas, agriculture. What we lack is coordination. We just need to get this strategy of bringing all these various trade flows in. If 10 countries can dominate 76% of the OIC trade, that's really shocking. What are the other 47 countries doing? Why are they not exporting enough? Is there a lack of skill sets? So the other countries can help to invest, and we pointed out the FDI inflow within OIC is extremely low. And finally, Islamic finance, as Brother Hussein mentioned, has a huge potential. We have a lot of capacity. We can do this cross-border financing. And when the trade flow comes, we can set up a rep office in Morocco, for example, and eventually become a bank. And then we can have a regional bank, the likes of HSBC and the rest. That's pretty much it. I've covered most of it. I mean, trade agreements, we have the infrastructure, logistics, regulatory harmonization. Digital single market is also important. Today, if you have the likes of Alibaba, where you can see all the products produced in China, why can't we come up with a platform where you can see all the various products being produced in the OIC world? And then through these Islamic banks, we can then facilitate the trade, and eventually we can lead to more FDI investments. That's pretty much you can see in your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafe, for a very comprehensive presentation on particularly imports and exports and FDI situation between OIC countries. I'm sure if some of the ideas that you presented today to exploit the opportunities that currently exist amongst Islamic countries, I have no doubt that what was predicted yesterday, 5 trillion in Islamic finance, could triple to 15 to 20 trillion. The opportunities are endless. So thank you very much for pointing us in that direction.
You gave me an idea for an app to develop.
Arif, now it's your turn. And you are supposed to cover toward prioritizing the development-based strategies by Islamic banks.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished guests, panelists, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Thank you for inviting BTP and Sharia and this prestigious forum to allow me to tell a story of BTP and Sharia and its journey to, practice community-based community development strategies in Indonesia. So in the beginning, the founder of BTP and Sharia is keen to focus itself on the bottom part of the population of Indonesia. It was around 45 million people there, and then as we study further, the potential is around 23 million. So BTP and Sharia believes in the power of women. So if we empower women, then the family will also get better in terms of well-beingness. And at the end, the country also boosted its economy. BTP and Sharia has the vision to become the best Sharia bank for financial inclusion and making difference in millions of Indonesian people. And its mission is to collaborate together to create opportunities for growth and making more meaningful life. Now, a short journey of BTP and Sharia was established in 2010 as a Sharia unit of the parent bank, BTPN. It's now becoming SMBC of Indonesia. And then in 2014, it gets spun off to becoming Sharia bank of its own, no longer Sharia unit. And in 2018, it's becoming a publicly listed bank. The bank operates in 24 or 34 provinces in Indonesia. It serves around 7 million people, and actively around 2.8 million people, 3.8 million, is active. It has an asset of 1.4 billion, and it has pretty good non-performing at 3.7. And at the moment, it has around more than 50% of its clients are more than 3 years with the bank. The average financing size around $500 US. So in the beginning, the story of BTP and Sharia, it started from the needs to help this bottom side of the population. So helped by a consultation firm, we evaluate which kind of model that works. And we decided that the real sector is the focus, should be the focus because of its risk profile that provide a suit better for the needs of the bank. And it also needs to promote the financial inclusivity program that at the time is being proposed, also being pushed by the government. In this particular segment, the Maqasid al-Sharia is chosen to be the best approach because at that moment, the only service provider for this particular segment is only the individuals who provide non-formal kind of financing. And later on, after these studies, then all of the studies has already completed, and BT Penshare is becoming the pioneer of this kind, serving the under population. We call the productive poor, those who live with $2 per day. And it's focusing also in the financial inclusivity in Indonesia. So how the model works, it has three elements in this. It's the customer itself with its asset, be there the experience, be there the needs, be there the dreams, whatever that they can develop further to improve their well-beingness. And the second element is the, what we call it daya, the empowerment, which is the financials. It comes from those in excess in terms of fund being put in the bank and it's being utilized to help these people. Also, it's provide knowledge sharing. This is very important because they need to boost the activity there so they're becoming a more, it's becoming profitable for them so they can enhance their economy status as well. Now, these two will work if we provide the third element, which is the infrastructure. We deploy around 14,000 staffs. 10,000 of them are deployed in the fields in the proximity with the customers so that they can help meeting with the customer, providing banking transaction with them, following up and monitoring and the progress. Now, these three elements works in kind of three access strategies. The first of the access that we provide is access to financing. As I told you, the financing coming from the those who are in access, put the fund in the bank as a deposit or savings. We provide the population in need with non-collateral based financings. And along with that, we provide them also with basic financial savings accounts so that they can have access to the banking systems. And also, we provide them with credit life insurance. So if anything happens with this customer, so the financing will be taken care of without burdening the rest of the family members. So this financing it is expected to build a behavior from the customers so that they have the courage to start the business. They're becoming work harder. They're also willing to get some discipline because they need to repay the financing back. And in the group, they supposed to help each other. So there anyone who needs help, then the other members can assist them to come out from the problem. The second access is to The second access is to the knowledge. There are a series of meetings, there are a series of knowledge being shared with this customer to help them activate their activity. So the first is the mini meeting, is the first encounter of the bank with the customer where the bank explains the product and services to the customer, and if they're interested, they're invited to the second meeting, which is mandatory membership meeting. In it, we explain on what kind of behavior that we expect from the customer to be nurtured, and then also we explain to them the basic financial management. I think we are the first one who taught them how to manage their funding. We use like envelopes, 4 envelopes for each ladies. One is for repayment of the financing back. One is for the restocking of the inventory if they open a grocery or any other else to support this business. The third envelope is to provide their basic necessities to life, and then the fourth one is the saving account. So we taught them how to manage the funding or the financing for their own. And then once they have graduated, so-called, from this membership training, they will be invited into the customer routine meeting. It's a 2 times a month meeting where our field officer will come to this meeting and assist the operation of this meeting. They can do all the banking transaction there. Customer can propose for financing, repay the financing back, taking or depositing saving accounts there. So basically, we bring the branch to their premises, which they select at which house that they want to meet. And also at the other end, we monitoring the progress. Should customer has reached a certain level, we put them into a category of inspiring customer. So we have around 25,000 customers at this moment out from 7 million we have. They will have like additional entrepreneur training, being invited into certain kind of events so that they can promote their product as well. So for this inspire customers as well, we kind of giving them some kind of reward. Every year we ask travel agencies to book one flight to go for Umrah and Makkah. Every year we do that, except for the COVID time. Next year we hope we have 2 flights to send them to Makkah for Umrah. Now, for the customer routine meeting itself, other than the financial transaction, they also have DAYA program, the empowerment program, basically focusing on 3 pillars, whether that's health, environment, or entrepreneurship. Now, we put this element of education into a digital platform, working together with universities in Indonesia. We have worked with around 360-something universities, and we have deployed about 3,600 students to becoming the mentor of these ladies. So we put the modules into this platform. The modules itself can be used by the students to coach these customers. And also the students themselves are being evaluated by the mentors so that they can grade, they put the grades on their credit of their participation in this program. So it's also benefiting for the students. The third element is the access to market. As I mentioned, the inspirational customer will get chance to go into our arranged festival. There are 3 different festivals that we arrange every year with the different invitees. One of which also the funding customer, so the funding customer can see where their money goes, and also they can probably connect themselves if there are any business arrangement or business settlement or business deal they can do. It is also welcome. Now, since this is an offline event, now we are thinking of going to online event. So working together with one of the famous platform in Indonesia, we open a store there, and we kind of select what kind of product that we can put into this platform so that the audience can get bigger, and then probably the product can be sold in more areas. So now, along the way, when we started the business, it's pretty manual. Everything's being written in a time of forms. Everybody uses just pencil and pen to record things. And we now have gone to certain kind of digitalization, especially in the banking process area. So all the activities of our field officers are being put into a tablet, so they can do all this banking transaction activity and records in the tablet. Also for arranging for the meetings, where they go to the meeting, it's GPS tracked, so they can go anywhere that they are assigned to. And also to work with the accounts that needs to be collected to their home, because maybe the lady is sick, something else. So all the activities being recorded and managed to this digital platform. That's on the banking side. On the customer side, we also do some kind of digitalization, but this only work on the funding customer because they have a good digital literacy. For the customer in the funding part, it's kind of hard. We still work on that because they're just not yet ready for this digitalization with many issues. We are also working with other kind of product that we try to do using digital platform. We haven't seen any success yet, but the last one, the individual financing using a soft collateral, probably is gonna work. So we'll see what kind of other product that we can produce through this digital platform. Now, the good thing is that we give these customer loans or financing that lasts for about 12 months period. Every period, and our field officer will visit the home of the customers and use a scorecard developed by IPA, previously as the Grameen Foundation. And this simple question, like 10, 12 questions that they can just simply ask or see what is going on there. For example, is the member of the family or all of them are going to school? What kind of vehicle of transportation they have? What kind of toilet that they have? What is the mainly used fuel for cooking, etc. And we track the progress every cycle from year 1, year 2, year 3, etc., etc. And we do see good progress in terms of everything is going to the way that we are intended to do. Of course, there are other programs that's being conducted by the government. So maybe our bank contribution into this kind of progress is fraction of that, but I think it's a good sign. So there's nothing without challenge. Our bank is facing quite of a challenge in terms of inflation. Inflation drives the capability of the customer to get higher financing down. Also, the cost of living increasing. Our team is deployed in many parts of Indonesia. It's also kind of difficult to put the logistic in place in time. And also, as I said, the digital literacy gap between the funding and the financing customer is pretty huge. Since we are now part of the SMBC group, there are opportunities also to collaborate within the group. We are currently now at 90% or 95% of product at the productive poor area. We try to reduce that into 80, and then there's 20 will be becoming a more advanced product working together with SMBC group, like the corporate or the commercial segment, so that we have a balance of risk in our portfolio. Also, we are thinking about doing green financing also with them. For partnership, we have had one relationship with one of Fintech that also focused on this productive food segment. They are providing like daily needs like rice, cooking oil, etc., so that the customer of our bank can buy these goods from them with a reduced price because they are dealing together directly with the manufacturer. The problem is again on the logistics part because getting the stuff from the manufacturer down to the rural area is quite challenging. Some strategic plan ahead, we're going to expand further on digitalization, especially in the banking process area. Customer side, we were thinking what kind of the digitalization we're going to put because we need to also consider the customers' readiness. New Green, women-focused financial product, along with SMBCI. And we're going to improve the monitoring tools that we have with the IPA. We may add some more variables that is more relevant to current dynamics and also take out the other parameters that's no longer relevant. And as in Indonesia, SMBC having also other companies that is working in financials, such as motor vehicle leasing and other leasing unit. So we may be also thinking of collaborating to them how to provide some kind of service to our customer. So in the end, I think BTPensyari has shown itself to be able to show a banking activity, Islamic banking activity with a development mission, and it has combined the ethical finance with a tangible result, and it has becoming a model of sustainable Islamic financing in Indonesia. Hopefully, that explains BTPensyari in short. I'm happy to take any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif, for a very detailed presentation. You chose, like Grameen Bank, one particular sector of the community, females, development, and then support, and have done so very successfully. I will ask just one question from Rafe and from Hussein, and before I open up the floor to you, ladies and gentlemen. Arif mentioned about use of technology and digital support in his presentation. What role do you think technology can play in enhancing Islamic finance, accessibility, and expansion?
I think in the space of the trade flow, what we have seen, the platform that we're working on with Santander, it will showcase, there are 5 areas we need to look at. If you are trying to find a market to export or to import, if you are buying raw materials, machineries, you need to see the opportunities in the market, the gaps, as I mentioned earlier. So the database will show if you are exporting palm oil to, say, 10 countries, what are the other opportunities in, say, for example, Africa? So the digital platform can showcase the buy side opportunities as well as the sale side opportunities. Then we can do virtual matchmaking. We can talk to potential buyers with our clients and then promote that particular linkage. And eventually then, the third, fourth, fifth is what are the trade barriers that exist, whether it's tariff, and then you have non-trade and non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers. So these things we have to explain country by country. Then you have the logistics part, right? How do you get your goods from, say, Indonesia to Nairobi, for example? So you need to have partners who can then bring out, look, these are the various licenses you get and the whole thing. And the final part is financing. That's where banks come in and say, look, you can get an LC from a bank in, say, Standard Bank in Nairobi, issues an LC, or Taj Bank will issue the LC, and then will be confirmed by a bank, say, BPTN in Indonesia, and then you can finally complete the trade deal. So the digital platform today can look at all these 5 aspects.
Thank you.
On the other side, I mean, think about it this way. So technology, blockchain, all that stuff can bring a very smart solution for problems that we currently have. Let me give you an example. So in Qatar, real estate ownership is restricted in some places to Qataris versus non-Qataris. However, this should not stop us from ability to basically get investors to invest in that space. And the smart solution we came up with, but we didn't come up with it, it's there, but we are in the process of expanding and implementing, is tokenization. So fractional digital ownership, right? So you own let's say, a real estate asset that's generating 7% rental income. You just put it in this platform, which creates digital ownership, and then you sell it to investors. Those investors don't own actually the asset, but they own the right usufruct of this project or the economic benefits of this project, and they get the returns. But also you can overlay on top of it a marketplace where these people can actually trade their investment. So the potential is massive, is huge. You can create significant value there. Also, another venue we can talk about is, especially in the fintech space, is democratization of investment, bringing Sharia-compliant investments to the masses. Right now, only people, institutional investors like us, maybe some large corporates, banks, some asset managers have access to complex transactions which are significantly interesting. Right now, there's a big gap in the market, a big pool of capital that has no access to these investments. So if you're able to bridge that gap by creating a platform that will democratize these investments, and if you look at the world today, BlackRock, HSBC, Blackstone, all the global asset managers are doing that because they have realized that the private capital or individuals like us, all of us sitting in this room, are becoming investment savvy, and they want to invest in this space. But there's no venue, there's no platform, there's no ability for you to access certain infrastructure investments being done by Blackstone or BlackRock in developed world. So how are you able to marry those? I think the only solution is digitization or creating a platform that allows you to take that. So that's one of the challenges, but I think potentially digital infrastructure or digitization could really bridge the gap.
Thank you, sir. As promised, I'll open the floor now to questions from, please. Do you have a microphone?
Yeah, the mic is coming.
Okay.
It's coming.
Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
First, it's not a question, it's a comment. This is Iman Shadi.
Would you speak a little louder, please?
Yeah, okay. Thank you all. It's Iman Shadi, the Executive Secretary of the Strategic Thinking Center, one track of the AlBaraka Forum. I am so pleased to be with you all. I think that all three topics are coming together to serve not only the purpose of the summit, but also all our purpose. I find that all three topics are intersecting and going together, serving it. And this is the goal, what we are aspiring to do in the Strategic Thinking Center. It's all about thinking strategically. So you all three highlighted this without mentioning the word, but it's directly meant to be thinking strategically, not only from the countries, Islamic countries, but also from the executive boards and executives of the institutional and the institutions of Islamic economy. We have many workshops that is doing the same, and I hopefully and be pleased to have you all in this. And it's like gathering all topics together. It's really a pleasure to have you here highlighting the same goal we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The gentleman over there. We'll come back to you. Come back to you.
Not very
No.
well.
Sorry.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you for a very insightful session. I would just divide this question into two sides of it. One focusing on businesses and one focusing on the regions. So if you look at ESG regulations and mandatory reporting environments that are coming in space, so more than 100 plus jurisdictions are becoming mandatory in the next 3 to 4 years. And especially this region is taking that up quite well as well. So my first question is, like, CBAM is in place, mandatory reporting for investments and local businesses is coming in space as well. What kind of consequences you're feeling for Sharia compliant businesses and the integration of that, number one. Number two, Mr. Rafi.
Let us answer the first question
Okay.
first. Then Rafi, would you like to handle that?
So the CBAM has been delayed. It was supposed to come in next year, but then been delayed to 2028, I think. But as I pointed out earlier, we're not even exporting much. So what really matters is for the 10 countries in the OIC world, and many of them are already progressing towards it. So if you look at the likes of Malaysia and the UAE, they've already come up with a plan by 2030 to get to carbon neutrality and by 2050 to net zero. What worries us is the standards in, or the requirements in the West keeps slipping. So maybe CBAM will never see the implementation, the effective, maybe, I don't know. But what I'm saying is the exporting countries are already preparing towards it. So the mix of renewable energy in Malaysia, in UAE is all increasing. So the rest of the OIC world needs to have a plan, needs to have a strategy. One is to find markets to export and to make sure that they are becoming more green in terms of their energy mix as well as the manufacturing processes. So the exporting countries are already on track to meet the CBAM requirements.
Thank you. Second question, please be brief.
What do you think of the OIC region or the countries working as the way EU has worked? Because it creates a leverage point, a negotiation points with the rest of the world. So either EU taxonomy, the regulation and standards, a combination of that with all the power of the Islamic economy, if they come together, do you think that there's a realistic way forward
It is
to actually make
possible.
it happen?
If you look at the 10 countries, there is a lot of cooperation now between Turkey, Malaysia. So ASEAN GCC is already, like last Monday we had ASEAN GCC session in Kuala Lumpur, where we are trying to create the ASEAN GCC FTA. that will help Indonesia, Malaysia work closely with GCC to boost exports within ASEAN GCC. And part of that would also include the pathway to carbon neutrality and net zero. Yeah. But we need to go towards, say, North Africa or Africa as a region. How do we build ASEAN, GCC, and Africa to get from 10 OIC countries dominating trade to maybe 30 in 10 years' time?
Thank you.
Can we have the mic here, please?
Assalamu alaikum. First, I would like to thank the speakers for the very valuable information we've been learned. Actually, if we are looking to the speakers, I think we will pass 100 years of experience if we combine your experience. So I have two questions actually. First, since I'm working in the insurance industry, especially the participant takaful system, I would like to ask from your experience, because all of you came from similar markets with roots of the Islamic finance. So how can you evaluate the situation of the Turkish Islamic insurance? Since if we go to the statistics, we find that compared to the conventional insurance, the market share for the Islamic insurance in Turkey, despite the years of experience, is still around 5%. Compared to the global growth rate, it's still too low. And compared to the conventional market in Turkey, still too low. So I need to know your expectations. I'm jealous about this industry. This is my first question. So please evaluate the situation. I need your expectations of the Turkish market.
Okay. Let me answer the first question. Okay. First, I'm on the board of an Islamic insurance company in Riyadh. We've got a long way to go. We are a million miles from where we should be. And I'm not blaming anybody, but the environment is such that Islamic insurance companies have very limited chance. Yeah. In a country like Pakistan, Islamic insurance failed. And in Saudi Arabia, wasn't allowed. It's not allowed. So we are too late, doing too little. So I'm afraid I can't give you a positive response.
In Qatar, actually, we had a very successful takaful insurance. Q-Invest owns a stake in Daman Insurance, which is one of the takaful. We were one of the founders. It's a listed entity, and they have done quite successfully. However, Qatar market at the end of the day is a limited market, and you're competing with giants like QIC, Qatar Insurance Company, and other companies. So the only way for these companies is either to consolidate or to grow and to go outside. In Qatar, there's a very keen interest in Sharia-compliant investment, especially from the investors. And these companies are by law required to be public. Therefore, most of them now are considering converting into Sharia compliant, which is a positive thing. However, the space of the investments or the space of the market is quite limited. So these guys need to go outside. And where can you go and grow into a Sharia compliant takaful space? You need to go to Islamic countries like Turkey, like Saudi. But for instance, Saudi is too expensive right now, and the multiples are crazy. So you have to go to other markets. That is where the debate is. However, for us to be able, or for these type of companies to come to Turkey and to invest in takaful space in Turkey, they need to be able to compete with the conventional side. Because if you are unable to compete, or if you are unable to put in front of the investor a product that makes him think twice about, okay, should I buy this insurance or should I buy this takaful plan? Let me put that money into this because it offers me more. This is where you're going to have a change in the market. But as long as you're not competitive, or you are, because of legislation, because of product offering, because of lack of capital, there's many reasons why it's not the best. But in order for you to be successful, you need to sway, you need to align interests. You need to make sure for the end users are actually really benefiting from that service. Financially, which is a very important point. People think that some people invest in Sharia compliant product just because of it's Sharia compliant. In reality, it also needs to be beneficial from a return perspective. You need to give them that edge. So I think, yes, I agree with our moderator. It's going to be still a long way ahead to go. However, in some markets, it's more advanced than others. So that's going to take some time to adjust. But I am sure the burden also lays on, from a regulatory perspective, from a product creation, but also from pools of capital. Investors big investors are not willing to put the capital to establish intakaful companies and to help grow the business. This is where the challenge is, I would say.
Thank you. I will shift to the question number 2. It's too short. Lately, we started to hear about the ethical finance. So if we look to the ethical finance globally in America, in the United States or UK or Europe countries, we will find that it's the same fundamentals of the Islamic finance.
Sure.
So is it a mask for the Islamic finance or totally different and parallel working? Thank you.
So let me give you a story that I like to tell. So basically, I started working in that space, investment banking, Islamic finance, 2009. Back then, when we used to meet, and all of our capital used to go outside. So we're investing in the US, UK, Western Europe. When you sit across the table from a project, from a financier, from an investor, from a promoter, private equity, and you tell them, can we do this structure as a Sharia compliant? They would look at you funny, like, what are you talking about? What is Sharia compliant? It's going to cost me more money to amend the documentation. No, I don't want to do that. Fast forward to today. Today, all the global asset manager, they come in already with Sharia compliant, LLM standard documentation in place. Already they come with all the Sharia structure in place. They come ready for a Sharia compliant sleeve. They already have in mind, when you tell them, well, is this Sharia compliant? The first thing they say, I don't have a Sharia fatwa, but this is ethical investing. So that tells you that this is why we've been doing this for 1400 years. It's not something that we started doing this. It's just that now it's becoming, because of ESG, because of the way the world is, ethical investing now is what is extremely beneficial. Everybody realized that if you want to keep growing for the benefit of the world, for the benefit of the people, for the benefit of the investors, while also making money, because that's a very important factor, ethical investment makes sense. So before, I used to say to we don't do pornography, we don't do gambling, we don't do firearm, we don't do games, all that stuff. Now they come to me and says, we're ethical investment. The first thing, we don't do gambling, we don't do fire. It's the same thing. So that tells you a lot how things have progressed from not understanding documentation and telling us, sorry guys, we're not going to be able to do the deal because your requirements on documentation is significant, or the structure you don't understand, or to now they are already prepared because this is where the capital is, and they want your capital. So they are willing to spend the extra effort to bring that capital by giving you all that. So for me, it's a telltale sign about what's going to come next. Our part of the world is where the pool of capital is, where the talent is, where potentially the opportunities for us to keep growing that space. So there's a lot of potential. What we need to do is we need to be able to benefit from all these platforms or all these springboards to build something bigger what is today. The market is massive. You saw yesterday throughout the day about with the guest speaker discussing that the market, conventional market is big, but the Sharia compliant market is very small. Yes, but that tells you that there's a huge potential for growth. And that is where we all should be working together from different parts of the stakeholders towards achieving that.
Thank you, Sam. I'm afraid we've run out of time, so we'll conclude this session. In conclusion, I'm sorry, they're asking me to close, so I'm sorry about that. In conclusion, the journey towards sustainable growth within the framework of Islamic economics is not just a theoretical endeavor, it is a moral imperative. By focusing on it, supporting ethical entrepreneurship, investing in renewable resources, enhancing education, proper utilization of zakat, and promoting trade, we can pave the way for an economy that thrives sustainably and ethically. As we embrace these strategies, let us remember that our collective responsibility is to not only seek economic prosperity, but to do so in a manner that reflects our values and honors our commitment to future generations. I thank you all most sincerely for being patient, and I'm sorry I've not been able to give everybody the opportunity for answering questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our moderator. I'm going to ask you to stay with me on the stage for a while longer. Thank you for that insightful discussion. I appreciate it. We are going to gift you with some certificates before you leave the stage. I'd like to invite Dr. Fayad Abdul Monem, the chairman of Salih Kamid Islamic Economics Award Scientific Committee, to present the certificates to our esteemed participants of the first panel of the day. We will begin by giving a certificate to our distinguished moderator, the member of the Board of Directors of Kuwait Finance House, Mr. Nurur Rahman Abid. We're now presenting a certificate to the Chief Executive Officer at Q Invest, Mr. Hussein Fakhruddin. And now the Group Chief Executive Officer of MBSB Holding, that comprises MBSB Bank and MIDF Group, Mr. Rafi Hanif. And last but not least, the Director of Compliance and Risk Management, Corporate Secretary at PT BTPN Sharia TBK, Mr. Arifa Ismail. Once again, thank you for that discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel of the day is centered around well-being and environmental strategies, social justice, and economic empowerment. Our panelists are going to touch on strategic planning involving Sharia governance, growing trends in Islamic finance, and economics and tech-driven finance. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Professor of Islamic Finance and Economy at the College of Islamic Studies and Program Coordinator of the PhD and MS programs in Islamic Finance and Economy at Hamad bin Khalifa University, the moderator of this panel, Professor Ahmet Faruk Aysan.
Teşekkürler.
Buyurun efendim. And joining Professor Aysan are the Professor of Middle Eastern and Islamic Political Economy and Finance at Durham University, Professor Mehmet Asutay. Hoş geldiniz. The Head of Islamic Finance at the London Stock Exchange Group, Mr. Mustafa Adil. And Chief Information Officer at Ream Finance, Mr. Mohammed Rushdie. Over to you, Professor Aysan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining this session, and today, to the second day, which is the more academic content will be discussed today, especially in this session. So I'm very pleased to be moderating this session. We have very influential, important speakers. They will all contribute from different angles. This session is kind of a main part of Islamic economics because it contains everything. The Sharia side is there, sustainability is there, Fintech is there. So a mix of everything, little into the middle is this session. So I'm a relatively liberal moderator, so I will let them talk and I will listen them, and I suggest you to do the same. But I will ask our speakers to have like 10 minutes till there is kind of a small regulation is needed. So if we can have like 10 minutes of presentation, 10-15 minutes, and especially let's give the floor to our audience. So I'm sure there will be very interesting questions. So without further ado, you all know our speakers anyway, so I will not get into detail. Let's start with our friend, Mehmet Asutay. He will talk about the Sharia side from scholars and so on. The floor is yours, please.
I'll use this one. Yep. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Unfortunately, I'm losing my voice. It's a good news, perhaps, that you're not going to be bored heavily with my presentation. So hopefully when the presentation comes up. In my work, I always go one step back. colleagues yesterday and today presented what's happening in the markets. But at the same time, occasionally it's important for us to remind ourselves what was the motive, what was the objectives, where we are, and where we want to go. And this particular session, looking into the Sharia governance, and I don't take that Sharia governance, I don't know whether the slides will come up, the Sharia governance that we refer in relation to Islamic economic strategy is beyond what Islamic banks governance is. In other words, how the Sharia boards operate, how the Sharia scholars operate, but it is beyond that. It's much macro level, but also touching upon individual behavioral norm as part of that governance strategy. And within that, of course, we have to understand the principles, dynamics, assumptions, and how to articulate a particular Islamic governance model. Because when we refer to governance, I don't know whether the slides are coming, colleagues? Anyone? Yeah. No, it has, oh, sorry. Yes. So the issue is when we refer to Islamic governance, somehow all of us, immediately jump to the conclusion how Islamic banks have Sharia boards and how those Sharia boards operate in ensuring how we move capital from one place to another place. However, Sharia governance, when we refer here in relation to economics, is a much larger concept. And therefore, it has a particular institutional logic, and therefore when we talk about strategy and ensuring a strategy, we have to understand the content and the context, and hence develop something else that covers all those aspects. So governance, therefore, refers to resource accessibility. It's just beyond ensuring Sharia compliance in Islamic banking. This is only just a smaller part of the whole process. And colleagues have discussed the market conditions, how Islamic banking is doing, but as I mentioned, I want to take it one step back. And the problems that we face, such as the human imprint on environment, the causes that we create. Again, a particular governance problem because at behavioral norm level, but also how the resource accessibilities are organized creates such problems. And it is something that we have to be concerned with sustainable development issues, we are looking into that. But also growth, we talk about growth, including Islamic banking growth, but what growth we are talking? What kind of a growth? On the one hand, we still work within the linear growth understanding, but then we want to have sustainable development. No, that wouldn't work. That's not possible because resources, again, resource accessibility issues will impose constraints. And therefore, this linear growth is not possible. Just running after something for better, but the resources are saying that, look, I cannot handle anymore. And then the financial part of the narrative. How financial assets in the world much larger than the real economy. And that creates all this fictitiousness. And with that fictitiousness, we are given an understanding that the resource accessibilities are provided through financial inclusion and financial movement, but in reality, huge debt problem. And hence, that fictitiousness creates problem after one problem another. And then when we look at Islamic banking, which is supposed to provide a moral compass to the markets and market conditions, rather than being shaped by market conditions, when we look at the sectorial distribution of what Islamic banking is doing, unfortunately, very much consumer durables, financial markets, and real estate. Again, the real economy impact is terribly limited, and financialization through consumer durables financing is a concern. When we look at, for instance, Malaysia on the table on the right-hand side, how Islamic financing contracts in relation to debt base, and in particular Tawarruk, has been heavily increasing in Malaysia and creating this equilibrium, what Islam and Islamic governance aims to have in terms of resource accessibility, but unfortunately the mismatch and the asymmetry that is created by the operation of Islamic banking. And therefore the moral challenge for an Islamic governance is how resource accessibilities can be possible possible, how we want to ensure that everyone, one way or another, has accessibility to resources that has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the governance issue, because governance refers to a particular social formation, how society organized in terms of ensuring resource accessibility is, how resource accessibilities can be arranged in a particular way. So on the one hand, we are in a liberal economy, a neoliberal economy. It has particular ways of organizing resources around corporations. On the other hand, we have Islamic governance and Islamic or the Sharia boards in Islamic banking. Again, the asymmetry is, we are operating with asymmetry. One particular knowledge base and the practice tells us that the resource accessibility has to be provided. However, neoliberal condition tells us that, look, we cannot have resource accessibility as the way you want to. And hence, the grafting process, Islam and Islamic finance is being grafted in the process. And therefore, the new imaginaries, and I was excited to see that here we are talking about Islamic economic governance. But again, of course, most of the debate has been on Islamic finance related. So the new definitions, looking into how to define human, how organizational behaviors can be redefined so that we can reach certain conclusions to understand the principles of Islamic governance so that the accessibilities can be possible. And that requires alternative ways of looking at reality. And that alternative ways, here we are talking about Islam, but other traditions and other philosophies can easily come up with other ways of organizing resource accessibilities. Within our circles, of course, this realism is very heavy. What we are said that, look, the reality is market condition. We have to look into how we can fit into market condition rather than we shape market condition. However, the substantive morality of Islam directly suggests us that we have to shape the existing rather than being shaped by the existing. Hence, the realist school, the heavy presence of realist school, so far, unfortunately, has not helped to bring that moral condition until sustainable development. The United Nations came up with sustainable development, and Islamic banking jumped, there is this Islam and sustainable development narrative. Even that is very much transactional. And therefore, strategic search for Islamic governance in terms of rescuing human, land, other resources, even capital from the domination of capitalism is an important constituent of this Islamic governance that we can come up. The justice part, the ihsan part, in order to ensure equilibrium, but also emancipation and empowerment. So the essence of an Islamic governance strategy is the emancipation and empowerment of people, but also other stakeholders, whether it is environment, whether it is land and labor, and hence the Falah process. So we have to therefore understand the motive, what motive we have. Only financial motives for maximizing profit, or it is beyond that. When we look at the conditions for Islamic governance as a principle, it is this, justice-oriented understanding, ensuring that the resource accessibilities are provided for everyone, and that's the essence of it. And therefore, in looking at that, just a reminder, the Quranic verse, the very first verse, read and then in the name of Allah, is an important reminder for us that reading here is not only education. It is much beyond that. It says, yes, read, but in the name of Allah. In other words, constitute your own ways of organizing life, whatever the aspect of life, in this case, economy and finance. Otherwise, there are other readings available around. So there is a particular condition how we want to understand the reality and how to shape that reality. And therefore, within that, the motive, when we look at this Islamic motives of reaching falah in this world and in the hereafter, just for the sake of Allah, that has been an essential motive rather than the financial or economic motives. What incentivizes people, economics and finance. Of course, in the Muslim world, it is the same thing, but therefore I mentioned we have to take one step back to understand how we can reshape behavioral norms, such as understanding what's the motivational source of Islam. Is it profit maximization or financial motives? No, it is very much this falah-oriented understanding that we want to achieve falah in this world and the hereafter. And therefore, that's the condition for this Islamic governance is the khair, the goodness that has to be done, because Islam, that connectivity between different stakeholders, between human to human, human to other stakeholders, is the essential part, and therefore conducting goodness is the essential. Therefore, an important pillars, or the important pillars of this Islamic governance is very much relates to Islamic ethics, and that starts with, of course, Tawheed. And Tawheed directly tells us how each one of us connected to each other and how we connected to society, environment, climate, land, and etc. And that requires, therefore, the justice. And everyone's interest has to be sought. So if we are thinking about how to reorganize governance, the interest of all the stakeholders has to be considered in the initial equation. And that's the essence. And sustainable development cannot do that, because sustainable development essentializes capital in the initial equation and then moderating the consequences. However, here, in the essence, you have to make the difference in terms of model. The virtue ethics, the ahlak, yes, in the Muslim societies, we talk and talk, but the idea is that ahlak, the ethics is there, I am here. No, virtue ethics of Islam directly tells us it is the articulated, it is the practice ethics. It is not the normativeness that we only refer to. And the teleological dimensions of that, the purpose, the motive, as I mentioned, this falah is an integral part of it. And the deontology, in other words, yes, duty is my duty to you, our duty to society, and our duty to environment, land, and etc., but also what consequences we are producing. And this is an important contentious issue in Islamic finance. The Sharia boards, they will say that intention is important. Yes, intention is important, but we have to, Islamic ethics requires the consequences. What consequences we have created moving capital from A to B? Okay, intention is good, but we might have undermined environment, the interests of other people, and land, and etc. And therefore, the Tawheed requires that the intention plus the consequence have to run together. And of course, fiqh is important here, but fiqh cannot just pretend to be rational legal system, just looking at capital again moved from one place to another with Sharia compliance, but what consequence produce? Unfortunately, fiqh remained on the intention part by disregarding the consequences, and that's important. And therefore, I know time is limited, but I have been looking into alternative ways of expressing this, the whole principles of how to constitute an Islamic governance. And I started looking at the names of Allah, the 99 names. So I started with Al-Wadud, for instance. It is the most loving or the affectionate, and it identifies Allah's boundless love and affection for all creation. So that can be an amazing starting point to express this connectivity, to understand the resource accessibility for everyone through Islamic governance as a principle. Then, of course, relating the Al-Wadud, this love, with other names brings us an amazing set of principles for Islamic governance, such as with Ar-Rahman and Rahim. It implies his love expresses itself in mercy to all creation, and hence we, being the Khalifa of Allah on earth, having those qualities, hence our governance as a strategy. And with Al-Ghafur and Al-Afu, he lovingly forgives again and again. With Al-Razzaq, he provides even to those who deny him. Okay, an important condition. Al-Adl, of course, the justice. With Al-Hadi, the lovingly guides hearts to him. And with Al-Qarib, his love brings him closer to the believers, and etc. So it gives us the conditions, just to give you an idea how it can work, such as the ethical condition. If I look at Al-Adl with Al-Wadud, the compassionate justice. So one main condition for Islamic governance, compassionate justice. Okay. How we are going to achieve that for all the stakeholders. In the next stage, it will be with Al-Rahim, it will be restorative, compassionate justice. Again, sustainable development, the Mizan, the whole Mizan part. The governance with Al-Malik and Al-Hakam, just sovereignty, the justice, the qist. With Al-Alim, wise, just, sovereign decision. The qualities of the decision makers as part of Islamic governance. The human part with Al-Ghafur and Al-Alim, with Al-Wadud implies patience and forgiveness. With Al-Basir, forgiveness with full awareness and forbearance. In other words, how individual behavioral norms can be provided. Such as Al-Razzaq and Al-Wadud would imply that a loving and moral economic system where the provision is dignified, in addition to zakat, waqf, and cooperatives, and etc. With all this, unfortunately, it's very detailed. Time is an issue. I cannot go into detail, but when we look at even the pillars of Islam, through such an understanding to develop an Islamic governance condition, when we look at Shahada, for instance, okay, it's a truth of Allah. That implies within this understanding, recognizing that all of existence originates in divine love, and therefore creation is not arbitrary but purposeful. What is that purposeful? Again, the sociability, the connectivity with others to achieve that. With Salat, for instance, aligning one's action with Al-Wadud by embodying compassion, proximity, and presence with creation. And hence, another condition for Islamic governance, the proximity, the compassion, presence with creation. With Zakat, for instance, that's a purification, measuring actions not only by justice, but by beneficence and tenderness. What appeals, uplifts and heals. Again, an important condition for governance. Okay, with fasting. Okay, withholding the ego to combine divine names. In other words, just giving up this idea of motive. The only motive is financial or economic, but going beyond that, establishing that justice, the restorative justice, as an important condition for Islamic governance. Again, Hajj directly tells us that it is the divine love through unity and mutual service. Again, the connectivity, and through connectivity, ensuring that no one is excluded. Again, is an amazing quality for Islamic governance that we want to look into. So the governance, when we look at, we talk about only in Islamic banking, just whether one particular transaction is halal or not, but what consequences and what is the general context of that governance through a particular social formation is terribly missing. And therefore, this Iqra, the read, tells us that the institutional forms that we are coming up has to provide those qualities that I try to list here or try to go through here to ensure those qualities are expressed in Islamic governance. Whether in Islamic banks through Sharia boards, whether larger context of an economy, and that's the essence that we have to consider. And therefore, that strategy directly tells that, the answer to these silly questions is not always 5 is superior to 4. Because when you add value to the equation, sometimes 4 can be superior to 5, sometimes they can be equal. So the whole imaginary changes when you introduce those ethical qualities into question. I'll finish with this one, Professor Einstein. So therefore, this condition for governance, Islamic governance, the story starts, the Mizan story starts directly with resource accessibility. Allah created the earth as well as the initial people with full accessibility to resources. But throughout the centuries, we ended up with the justice condition until the emergence of, until the Enlightenment philosophy telling us that God is dead. And people had access. Yes, there were barriers, but people had access, certain access without any particular interference. But now the reality that we have around us, the governance that we have, unfortunately favors corporations at the expense of people. Everything that we have around us is commodified. Whether water, whether energy, whether air even is commodified. And remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you cannot commodify water. You cannot commodify energy in terms of we use the fire as well as the air. But everything is commodified. Accessibility is not possible. Water is heavily commodified around us that we have to pay. Agriculture sector is suffering that they have to pay. And therefore, with those qualities I mentioned, the whole objective is the restorative justice, how the restorative justice can be possible. In other words, we are now in the dominance part. This is our realities. Some of us in terribly negative position. So the objective, therefore, how to achieve that. And then equality doesn't solve the problem as certain ideologies attempted. And solution is equity, at least in the short run. And that is the role for Islamic finance. And hence, governance of Islamic finance has to ensure that that equity condition that we are referring has to be achieved. When we go to class, we teach our students what is Islamic finance, profit and loss sharing, risk sharing, and equity financing. And where is that equity? As I shared the data with you, unfortunately, it is not there. That condition that we expect, that the equity condition from Islamic finance is not happening. But the governance model I try to explain, and there are plenty to discuss, of course, time is an issue, aims at justice. So that, yes, there are barriers, but people have accessibility. And in the end, the utopia is go back to the liberation, that the way Allah created. Whether that happens or not, but at least in the short run, or the medium run, how equity financing through Islamic finance can contribute to this governance so that the accessibility can be possible, and at least so that we can move to the justice condition without domination. And therefore, it is very important to remind myself and yourself why Islam did not come up with corporations. Even fiqh today cannot justify corporations. There is no. Why? Because by being a third entity, being an external entity, you cannot claim rights on resources. And therefore, Islam historically went for what? Business partnerships. So that the third entity, a legal entity, cannot have a right. Of course, in the modern times, we are using the waqf structure to justify corporations, but unfortunately, it doesn't solve the problem. And that was the quality of Islam that did not come up with corporations. People like, scholars like Timur Kuran would say that Muslim world could not develop because they couldn't come up with corporations. No, it's nothing to do. The Muslim world was not innovative. No, the institutional logic of Islam aims at this equity, this justice. It wouldn't allow you to do that. And therefore, when we look at Islamic corporate governance, we have to understand a particular definitional issue, and that's the iqtisad. And iqtisad beyond the economics. Economics is only profit maximization, utility maximization. But when we look at iqtisad as the determining factor of this worldview, it tells us that the whole objective is directing towards an objective. Your objective function is entirely different here. It is directing towards an objective, it is the just share, and therefore justice, giving the right of everything to everything. And hence, establishing that condition that I refer to. And hence, plenty of issues to discuss. I have been working on this to develop a particular model, but the governance that we are referring to, Islamic governance, the mizan condition is the essence, hence sustainability by definition, the justice, the accessibility to resources for humans, but non-humans as well, all the creatures, hence sustaining the equilibrium that is created as a condition between different stakeholders, the relationship, and how that can be achieved, the Khalifa condition, the human being the Khalifa condition, and hence, in the end, inshallah, the Falah condition. And hence, this is an amazing area for us to consider, and therefore, going beyond this particular efficiency condition, but moving into a condition in which we can bring all the stakeholders together in equity frontiers. Having Islamic banks operating with efficiency frontier doesn't help us. We cannot bring all these conditions into that because it's only profit maximization. But when we bring all the other stakeholders to the equation, as you can see on the screen, then we would be able to say that, look, our Islamic governance model incorporates the interest of all the stakeholders without excluding anything. And that's the real sustainability, that's the real governance, that's the real accessibility to resources. And hence, I'll leave you with that. It is an exciting narrative, and we have to, rather than being shaped by the existing structures around us, we have to provide a moral compass and understand that the akhlaq, the Islamic ethics here, refers to fairness and equity. It refers to, as a care, it refers to stewardship and sustainability. As a generosity, it refers to compassion beyond duty. As a holistic concern, it refers to well-being of all the stakeholders. And as a solidarity and mutual support, enhanced condition for Islamic governance here for us as an important condition. Thank you very much, and my apologies for running over the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor, it is, oh, you want to sit? Okay.
Thank you. So, thank you very much, Professor Mehmet Asutay. So, let me start with a question to you. You bring many different concepts, little into the middle from all theories.
Yes. Not really, not structured. I would challenge that.
Yeah.
It's not everything in the middle. Yeah.
So, the governance is more about the relations with others. But we know that you have been emphasizing this moral economy. And the moral economy is more about the individuals. And many of the things that you presented are about the individuals. But when it comes to the governance, it is more about the institutions. And it reminds me of the Adam Smith paradox, or the Adam Smith problem, where in the theory of moral sentiment, Adam Smith has emphasized the self-love, not the self-interest, and the impartial spectator, where this self-love will be moderated through the impartial spectator. But it is all more about the individuals, how to be good Muslim and so on, sort of. But when it comes to the governance, it is in the more of the Wealth of Nations, where he talks about the system. And when he talks about the system, he moves to the self-interest. And it's a big discussion whether there is a kind of a contradiction between these two books, but there is no contradiction in the sense that the first one is more for the individual, and the second one is for the institutions. Right now in your presentation also, and also with all these concepts and so on, there is one aspect looking at the individuals, but when it comes to the governance, it is all about the institutions, all about how the society will be structured. And do you see that there is kind of what is the matching point? Because what is morally right for the individual may not necessarily mean that it is implementable, because most of the things which you have presented more in the theory, but when it comes to giving some concrete example, because Islam is not a new religion, right? It is more than 14th century right now Islam we are experiencing. And still, I sometimes feel like we are still talking about the theory. We have to be doing this, doing that. But at the end of the day, these are the institutions we built, right? We are in the Istanbul Finance Center. So my question is that, are you hopeful about the individuals? Do you really believe in humans? If you do believe in humans, which you are utopian at the same time, as you mentioned, and that means that you are believing in human, but what good do you see in humans?
Okay. I think we have huge ontological difference. We always have this chat. But I thought it was clear in my presentation that the realistic position, yes, we are in the Istanbul Financial Center, but we can reconstitute Istanbul Financial Center in such a way to produce moral outcomes rather than just replicate the existing institutional structures. Every ontology creates its own institutions. So my references here are not only relates to individual behavioral norm, those qualities are expected from the institutions that we can come up with. So, but what we have done with the realistic Sukuk, we have taken the institutional logic of a particular ontology, and we brought here through Islamization, and therefore what we have done, we put the Sharia boards to ensure that the governance, Sharia governance can solve the problem. No, it is not solving the problem. Alhamdulillah, Islamic finance has gone through a huge political problems, the economic problems, but it is heavily successful industry. But the transactional success has not been trickling down to affect the lives of ordinary people. Rafi is here. He would confirm 1960s slogan of Islamic finance in Malaysia, making the lives of Bumiputras better. What happened to Bumiputra's life? Because that's not happening, because the institutional logic is not allowing that. However, here we are talking about a different institutional logic, and therefore I would challenge that I didn't go into the institutional issues. No, institutional logic relates to the institutional qualities and how the institutions are constituted. And Islam has a particular position. So when we talk about behavioral norm, that's the horizontal level. I didn't go into horizontal level. The vertical level, but then how it is articulated in the horizontal level in the society. Just to give an example, again, yes, it is 14th century ago, but those stories, because Adam Smith is 500 years ago as well, but we still refer to them, yeah? So Quranic essence, when Prophet ﷺ migrated from Mecca to Medina, there were 2 markets in Medina. But what he did, he created a 3rd market. Not just because he wanted the Islamic market. No, so that the behavioral norms, those qualities, the Muslim behavioral norms, can be expressed in the necessary and symmetric institutional form. So if you use the term the Medina market, the Islamic Medina market provided an opportunity space to articulate the Islamic behavioral norms in the structure, okay? And therefore shaping that structure. That structure, the Medina market did not exclude non-Muslims coming into that market, but it put certain conditions for everyone, Muslims or non-Muslims, how to operate in that market so that the behavioral norms, Muslim behavioral norms, can be complemented with the institutional structure that you have. And therefore my position here is not only very tasawwufi understanding how the behavioral norm, no. It directly refers to the political economy of Islam through those qualities, how we can constitute, such as corporate social responsibility and sustainable development. So you have institutions, but now we are saying institutions to have moral qualities. Okay, we are imposing moral qualities, again, moral behavioral, individual behavioral, but we are expecting institutions to produce moral qualities, even capitalist institutions. And similarly, by definition, institutional logic, the emergence of institutional logic in Islam requires from the beginning to embed the moral condition within the operation. We talk about corporate social responsibility, stewardship. Okay? The corporations are not stewardship, but we are imposing so that they can do something. But by definition, the falah condition, the khalifa condition requires individuals and institutions of Islam to produce such qualities. Without taking any further, the asymmetry that you think, it is not necessarily there when you move out from this imposed institutional logic on us, the realistic. You might say, and therefore I went through the short-term and the long-term conditions, how we can reverse the order so that the resource accessibilities can be possible. Otherwise, in the beginning, as I mentioned, governance refers to a social formation. Social formation, how we organize society and how the resource accessibilities within a society can be organized. And Islam has a particular way of responding to that, how to organize that. So it is beyond whether I have hope in people. Of course I have hope, because Quran tells us that we have to have hope. But beyond that hope, the institutional structures that Islam provides us also aims at constituting a particular institutional logic through which we can provide the necessary environment for people to operate and hence produce such results. The ihsani governance condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tostay. Brother Mustafa, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So my presentation is going to be on the principles of environmental stewardship in Islamic economics, the responsibility practices and initiatives. And the presentation is essentially going to focus on my area of expertise, which is around Sukuk and the development of green and sustainable Sukuk to be able to essentially support the global drive of the Islamic finance industry towards more embracement of the principles of environmental stewardship. I'm just waiting, I think, for them to load the presentation, and then I can start. I think over the last... no, it's not behind. No, it's not behind. Yeah. It's only in front. Yes.
Look here.
I think over the course of the last day, we've had a lot of conversation around the Islamic finance industry, and a great milestone that the industry has crossed $5 trillion in the last 50 years of its development. And if you look at the last decade, it's been growing at around an average of 12% year on year over the last 10 years, and it's projected, I believe, in the next 6 to 8 years to actually cross the next 5 trillion. So 50 years to hit 5 trillion, another 6 to 8 years to hit another trillion. But I think what is also very important for us to understand is what the industry is made up of. And if you look at the breakup, about 72% of assets come from Islamic banking, and another 18% come from Sukuk. So essentially 90% of the Islamic finance industry assets are coming from these two sectors. The Islamic finance industry, when we talk about it, is really banking and the Sukuk market. So I think it's very important for us to understand where these industries are trajecting, for us to understand where the industry is going. Now, when we talk about principles of sustainability, we all understand that there is a very significant and natural alignment between the principles of sustainability and the principles of Islamic finance. For those of us who are in the industry, we recognize our various restrictions that are aligned with sustainability, but that recognition goes beyond just the industry professionals. If you look at the literature, when we talk about ESG investing, sustainability investing, from more than 20 years ago, most institutional bodies recognize Islamic finance as living up to many of those principles. Whether you look at the CFA Institute or PRI under United Nations or others, for more than 2 decades they've been talking about Islamic finance either as a subcomponent of ESG investing, categorized either as faith-based investing or values-based investing. And that recognition particularly caught the spotlight after the 2008 financial crisis, when the global financial industry was suffering from a lot of challenges, but the Islamic finance industry showed a lot of resilience. But over the course of the last 2 decades, the global industry has significantly moved on. It's no longer sufficient for us to simply claim to aspire to certain principles or to have negative screening and be accepted as sustainable in today's world. The global industry has various different standards, disclosures, use of proceed requirements, value creation and value monitoring requirements that are now being integrated on what is acceptable as sustainability. And the Islamic finance industry is also increasingly accepting and integrating those considerations into that. And that's primarily being driven by 3 key stakeholders. You have the regulators, so you have many different regulators around the world that are introducing sustainability standards that are specific to Islamic financial institutions. You have examples like the VBI, the Value-Based Intermediation Initiative in Malaysia, that is incorporating disclosures around the value that Islamic banks are creating beyond simply financing. You have the UAE launching their sustainability guidelines that are specific to Islamic banks, and so on. The scholars are increasingly understanding that their role is not limited simply to negative screening, not limited only to say, okay, this is not against Sharia because of 1, 2, 3, but also how it aligns with Sharia. What is the positive value that it creates for society, for the environment, for marginalized communities in those markets. And then lastly, you have greater awareness amongst investors to understand that simply investing in Sharia may not cause the positive impact that I want my capital to have on society, and that there are various other metrics that I should be looking at when I'm considering the implementation of the type of social change that I want to develop through the capital that I have available to myself. So these are all considerations that the industry is increasingly adopting. And my presentation will focus on capital markets and the biggest instrument in capital markets, which is Sukuk, because capital markets are very easy to adopt new market trends and are very easy to monitor and showcase with data as to what the impact of that will be. But before I go into the numbers, I want to talk about what is sustainability sukuk, right? What does that mean when we say the sustainable sukuk? So essentially, there are three main types of these sukuks. You have the green sukuks. These are instruments that are utilizing the proceeds from their issuances to fund any type of Sharia-compliant green projects. And you have international principles like the green bond principles that you can align to be comparable with the conventional market. You have social sukuk, where the use of proceeds are used for social projects. And then you have sustainability sukuk, which is a combination of green and social initiatives. And then you have sub-themes within that, like transition finance, blue finance, gender finance, and so on. But what does that mean for funding green projects, right? So what my team has done is they've assembled some of the examples of the use of proceeds that different sukuks use. So if you look at green sukuk, it could be for, funding renewable energy, energy efficiency, for pollution prevention, for environmental management, for aquatic and biodiversity protection, for clean transportation, sustainable water, and so on. These are very, very specific use of proceeds that need to be identified in the documentation and then need to be monitored and reported on through disclosures for an instrument to be accepted as a green sukuk. And likewise for social, you have affordable infrastructure, access to services, housing, employment, food security, socioeconomic empowerment. All of these are use of proceeds that are utilized for these instruments. So how has the industry performed and where do we stand today? So if you look at it since the issuance of the first green sukuk in 2017, the industry has grown exponentially. Issuances have been growing at a rate of over 60%, almost 70% year on year. And as of 2024, we had $15 billion in green sukuk issuances or sustainable sukuk issuances, which added up to about $50 billion in cumulative outstanding, about 5% of the $1 trillion sukuks that are issued today. But what is particularly interesting is the breakup between sustainable and green. If you look at the conventional sustainable bond market, over 75% of the market consists of green bonds. But if you look at the sukuk market, it is much closer to 50-50 and slightly more on the social issuance side. And that I think we would all accept is intrinsically what we would sense from Islamic principles, that we place equal importance on social causes as we would to environmental causes. And that is reflected in that. The other thing that I would want to mention as well is the concentration when it comes to countries. So the four largest issuers of sustainability-linked sukuk, Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, make up about 85% of overall issuances to date. And if you add the Islamic Development Bank, which is the supranational in that equation, that's another 10%. So 95% is coming from four markets plus the Islamic Development Bank. So there's a lot of work and progress that we need to make in other markets in the issuance of these. And I'll talk about some of the challenges as well that these markets face. If we look at the split in terms of the issuance type, I think that is quite well diversified. If you add up the sovereign, quasi-sovereign, and supranational, that makes up about 50%, which is what we would consider the government or government-aligned issuances. And if you add up the financial and non-financial corporates, that's another 50%. So the industry is reasonably split. But what you will see is financials make up a very, very large portion of what we would consider the non-sovereign sector. And why is that? What we have seen is that in most markets, the financial institutions and the Islamic banks are the ones that have the most advanced green and sustainability frameworks. And establishing the sustainability framework is a prerequisite to being able to issue instruments against that program. So what we have noted is that Islamic financial institutions and large corporates, telecom companies, and major corporates in those industries are the first to be able to tap into these markets. And you can see even in the breakup that I've given, the likes of Saudi Electric, Majid Al Futtaim, DP World, etc., are some of the issuers that have been able to tap in that because they've developed that sustainability framework. And as exchanges drive sustainability considerations into their markets, we will see more and more listed corporates be able to adopt the framework and then be able to tap into the market to access the capital that is looking for this type of investment. And then what we see from a global perspective is a number of countries have introduced policies, regulations to help the issuance of these instruments. And what is particularly interesting on the right-hand side is the international standards. So you have various different international bodies that are setting cross-border governance standards so that these sukuks can be traded in international markets and meet with international best practice and standards when it comes to the issuance of these types of sustainability instruments. What we also did was we conducted surveys of the largest issuers, arrangers, and investors in the Sukuk and green Sukuk space to try to understand what they're looking at, what are the trends that they're considering. So if you see the top considerations, over 50% of the underwriters expected a significant increase in demand of green Sukuk and sustainability Sukuk over the next few years. So increase over the rate of issuance that we've already been seeing, which is at over 60% year on year. And another 40% felt that that continued trajectory would continue. So very, very optimistic from an underwriter issuer perspective. They said that the primary driver is the ESG mandates that are being in place. And that is something that is very real and that is a challenge. I was speaking to the head of investments for one of the conventional banks that recently converted to Islamic. And they have a green mandate that has been put on them by their board. And what they were telling me is that previously he had an investable universe of 5 trillion green bonds that he could invest in. Now he has an investable universe of over only 50 billion green and sustainable sukuk. So that's a major challenge. It creates a challenge of where he can invest, creates a challenge of how his institution can create diversity within their portfolio. So that is continuing to drive that. And the top 3 criteria that they look at is the level of Sharia compliance, the clarity in the use of the proceeds and how clear that is, and how they can track and monitor that, how they monitor the ESG impact, and the pricing and valuation which you would expect from any type of issuance and instrument. And then if you look at the investor side, it's also very heartening. 55% of investors are planning to invest in sustainability and green sukuk over the next few years. More than 45 highlighted limited green and sustainable sukuk offerings as a key challenge, which reflects to the example that I gave. And 63% of investors are getting a better understanding of what that means to be sustainable, what that means to be green, how it links with the core principles. And again, if you look at over the last 3 years, the average oversubscription rates, the average green sukuk is oversubscribed on average 4.3 times compared to 3.1 times for a traditional sukuk. So even though we say there is excess capital in the Islamic markets, Sharia-sensitive capital that is looking for assets, there is even more demand for sustainability-linked assets compared to conventional or traditional sukuk. And lastly, I want to conclude with this slide which talks about, the way ahead, right? What do we need to do to achieve the type of transition that we want in this space, right? First is promoting common regional international standards. I think it goes without saying that going beyond borders, being able to be marketable, being aligned with international best practices is very, very critical to being able to achieve the type of success and growth that we would want in this space. Building capacity and enhancing the ecosystems. That includes increasing market depth so that investors have a breadth of solutions to be able to invest in and create diversity within their portfolios. Leveraging innovation to support the development of new projects, transition, and other things to be able to support the growth of the industry. And finally, expanding the investor base, right? Moving beyond the traditional sukuk investors, bringing in the sustainable capital that exists outside the Islamic finance industry and bringing that capital to work in OIC markets along with these sustainability projects to help move the transition. With that, I think that is my time and I will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Brother Mustafa. So let me continue with my question. Thank you for bringing this sustainability dimension to Sukuk. My question is that, are we taking this sustainability discussions too seriously as people in Islamic economics? I believe there is a very good thing happened in the last 4 months, thanks to the Trump administration. In US, many of the ESG-related regulations have been lifted. And the companies were very ready for that, right? And there is one saying in economics, really, incentives, there is something bad about the incentives. Incentives really works. This is the bad thing. And this is exactly what we are experiencing right now with the Trump administration. He kind of lifted this ESG-related principles. And then all of a sudden, we realize that very big companies are not necessarily acting ethically. They are not necessarily caring about the sustainability. But when it comes to Islamic economics, especially in Malaysia, I should say, this sustainability, there is something good about Malaysia in the sense that, I mean, they are more integrated with the rest of the world, with the financial system and so on. But at the same time, we take this sort of concept too much seriously, right? I mean, it is as if sustainability was already in Islam. We are all sustainable anyway, this sort of discussions. So my question to you right now, are we taking the sustainable discussions too seriously? What should be the response of the Islamic economics? Because if the global, because at the end of it's also related with the governance question. At the end, governance is about the power. And if the global powers are shifting their attentions, does it mean that we are one way or other followers to a certain extent depending on the power? But does it bring us, the individual countries, to follow our own agenda? Because at the end of the day, apparently there is no such thing as universal sustainability. It is all about politics to a certain extent, as we observe from the US side. Are we taking it too seriously, Mr. Adil?
So I wouldn't say that we're taking it too seriously, but I would say that we can be cautious about purely following standards of over time depending on the political environment, right? I think that there is a broad understanding for us. When most of us entered Islamic finance, a few decades ago, we were very much driven by the fact that we wanted to operate in an industry that offers an alternative and positive impact and change, right? An industry that doesn't invest in harmful sectors, that doesn't speculate, that doesn't create artificial bubbles, that invests aligned to economic activity and real assets, right? And that is a very positive message that, no matter where in the world you talk about it, people will recognize the value proposition around that. I think that because of the drive to focus on sustainability, we know a lot more about the impact and the way to monitor that impact from investing activities, right? So we always get examples of, people using Sharia-compliant instruments to fund projects that are harmful to communities. People using Sharia-compliant instruments to fund initiatives that are damaging to the environment. I mean, I've even heard, certain entities using Sharia structuring to invest in sectors or instruments that would be deemed to be non-Sharia compliant, right? These are real examples of that. So I think it is a responsibility for us as an industry to address that challenge, right? To put into place the appropriate disclosures and guidelines, not to satisfy maybe, investors in the US or investors in other markets, but to satisfy our own desire for making sure that our capital is having the type of positive impact in society that we would want to see from that. And I think that, having technology is a great equalizer to create transparency. Many of the things that we could not monitor 20 years ago, we can now monitor through technology. We can monitor the impact that our investing activities are happening, not just on the immediate company that we invest in, but on the broader society around it. And we can report that to the investors as well. So, when we learned Islamic finance theory many years ago, it was always about, yes, we want risk sharing, we want, equity based, but we cannot get reporting on companies' performance. We cannot get true trust between what is the end impact, how will the profit be distributed. Technology creates a lot of capability for us to address that. So I think that combination of technology and greater awareness of how we should be leveraging and utilizing these and disclosing the activities, I think will bring about a great impact in the Islamic finance industry, and sustainability is going to be the driving conversation around that.
Thank you, Mr. Adil. These are all true. That is the issue. This is my problem, because this becomes more tautological after a while. So, for example, from my perspective, when we approached Sukuk, I made a presentation recently at Kapsark in Saudi Arabia. My point is that we should improve the Sukuk. We should have some sort of local and regional products, even for the global political reasons. Because right now, the world financial markets will not be as global as before, most likely with these tariffs and so on. So we need some sort of an escape routes. And the escape routes could be Islamic finance. It can be completely political. And we will have, as has been presented in the previous panel, where the Muslim worlds are not necessarily trading. There are reasons for that, but for the Muslim worlds, they should have some tools to at least to collaborate with the other countries. And the Islamic finance can serve for that purpose, because when you issue Sukuk in Turkey, who is buying them? Gulf countries are buying them. Malaysia is buying them. So it is kind of a insurance for you to be part of the global financial system, but to be able to differentiate yourself. So we have to have this kind of a realistic perspective in approaching the Islamic finance. That's why I am somewhat, these are all true, but all true. I mean, it will be always true, right? So that's why we have to care about the sustainability, governance, transparency. But this becomes, after a while, not very realistic, because this becomes too much idealistic, and it will be always true. So we have to really think about the contemporary issues. And for example, again, I really believe that Trump administration was a good case for us to bring us, awaken us. Okay, these are all kind of rhetorics, and we have to provide and produce our own rhetorics in a very realistic manner. And I believe the Sukuk market, sustainable schools, should serve for that purpose. Inshallah, let's move to our brother Mohammed Rushdie. He has founded 4 different banks. Alhamdulillah, we had a dinner together, and he is more on the technological side. He was one of the frontiers of the digital banks, the technology side. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Till the slide come. Dunya taki insividium shahir lardin biri ulan Istanbul da bu sirkin it klinikte kunush mekten karaktikten onor u mutluluk diurum. I'm just trying to thank you for your own language. I'm very glad to be here. Jazakallah khairan for inviting me. I like to walk while talking, I don't like to sit down, so I just, I think also we need to, try to, wake you up. So sometime I will be asking questions, so be ready, They asked me 15 minutes, but I need 1 hour, okay, be ready as well. Okay, we'll be talking about tech-driven, finance, or tech-driven fintechs and so on. I think in each and every discussion you're gonna see these days, fintech, innovation, digital is there, data, all of these are today's, we live in a digital economy. And I think the GE chairman or CEO maybe 10 years back said, we are, running a digital company in a manufacturing company. It's true. So digital is everywhere today. Without this mobile phone, which we are having in hand, you might leave home without wallet, but you cannot leave home without digital. Maybe after this, I'm going to tell you a story happened to me when this mobile was off in Abu Dhabi, and I couldn't even take a taxi. So you have to be careful as well to get some cash in your pocket. So, talk about global fintech adoption. You're going to see 64 global adoption rate. And that's a great thing here. You're going to see later that we are even ahead. 75% of this adoption in payments. So if you talk about fintech, innovation, digital, payment was the first thing which started to be disrupted, innovation. And it was easier as well for fintechs to go through payment because, it's a day-to-day life. You pay living from your home, you buy grocery, you transfer money, and so on. So payment was the king here. And digital first approach. You go talk to any bank or any organization, you say digital first, mobile app, marketplace, super app, all of this you hear. And we can see here the market value for 2025 for the total fintech, almost 95 billion, while expected to go 1.1 trillion by 32. It's a massive growth. But being an Islamic fintech forum, Islamic banking forum, where we are here from an Islamic banking point of view as well, I think we have a great achievement happened last 4 or 5 years. You will see here that the market size, 161 billion by 23-24. We expect to be 306 billion by 28. 13.6 CAGR. I think the normal fintechs, it was 11.6. And we are expecting, we are around 490 industry players where, the concentration. I think Malaysia being leading big time in Islamic finance. And a shift is happening now. If we come to fintech and digital, it becomes Saudi, GCC, and so on. It's a great thing for all of us. We are competing in a good way. What's behind this one is Saudi vision, for example, 2030. The central bank has an ambition to get 500 plus by 2030 fintechs. And most of them are, or all of them are Islamic, fintechs. You look here at, the global fintech adoption, as I said, 64 globally, but Turkey 71, Saudi Arabia 75, UAE 73. So you see our countries here, they have more adoption. Why? I would say, and I have another presentation on that, I think young generation, the technology is there and so on. So this is one of the reasons. Let me ask you a question. Now this is what I always said I will ask. Is fintechs are new or old? Everybody will say, if study is old, you raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, old. That's fine. Thank you very much. The rest is new. Let me tell you something. You see here in this presentation, I think I presented this maybe 7, 8 years back, and I've done some research around it. There is something called traditional fintechs or institutional fintechs. This fintech, financial technology, means, the companies making technology for finance, actually. If you look at Visa and MasterCard, they said we are a fintech company, but they have been 100 years back there, right? FIS, if you were to go to their website, the core banking vendor, they said we are a fintech company. But guys, the fintech is only, we knew about it 4 or 5 years back only, or 7, I think since the crisis only. What happened here, you can see in this diagram, the traditional financial service and customers. This is the relationship. The bank and the financial service in the middle, traditional fintechs, which they give technology to banks, and then the customer get the service from home, from banks only. So what happened? This one, the disruptive fintechs. After the crisis, fintechs started coming up to give service to the customer directly, to eat the lunch of a bank. Some of them. Wise, for example, one of the biggest ones, money transfer globally. People in Europe used to use banks to transfer money, but they didn't use fintechs to transfer money. So this where this fintech become, yes, there is a fintechs, and there was something which we say a zero-sum game. Everybody was thinking fintechs will replace banks. I remember a colleague and a brother in Saudi Arabia. He has a very good fintech blockchain initiatives. 7 years back, we were in a conference or an event in Dubai, and he said, Muhammad, banks will be disappearing next year. I laughed. I said, he's not a banker like me. I understand it's too much, to say like that. Blockchain will replace everything. It's not true. So in the beginning, it was like a zero-sum game. But actually, which model is prevailing, which model really is everybody's using? This one, you can see here. You still, the blue color here, the fintechs are giving the customer the service, but through a bank partnership. You're going to hear the word banking as a service, card as a service, and so on. Where? Because you cannot really work without a bank, most of the time, not all, by the way. And for a fintech to get licensed by a bank or central bank, it's quite difficult. It's not easy for them. That's why the collaboration become the way forward. So this is the prevailing, as I said, model. But I need you to take 2 things from my presentation today, plus the discussion we'll have later about this concept in front of you. But what this fintech's done? This fintech's done 2 things: unbundling services and products. And I call 2 things: unbundling horizontally and vertically. Which means, when you go to a bank today, any bank you go today, let us say, Garanati Bank, one of the big banks here in Turkey, and you go there and ask the team, how many service products you have? You will not get an answer. Why? They tell you first, which one, retail or corporate or investment? Because they have everything. Then you tell him, I need retail. He said, okay, let me check with the retail head. He might not be able to give you the number exactly. But what fintech has done is this one, horizontal unbundling. It became, said, okay, I do one service, one product, I do it well. I become specialized, not generalized. So I do one KYC, for example. If you do onboarding for a customer onboarding, you do KYC, you check your your Turkish ID or Emirates, whatever ID, and then you are able to know that it's you. You look at your face, you look at your ID, make everything. This is KYC only. It's one part of customer onboarding. This one part, many companies are specialized on this part only. They do it very well. But if you go to a bank, the bank will do it for you by their own. So here you're going to see, if you look at this screen, you're going to see lending. There is some fintechs for lending only. Financing only. They do financing only. And they don't do financing for everybody. No, we'll do for for blue collars. They're going to do financing for SMEs. They are very much specialized. They do it very, very well, more than others. You look at the blockchain and crypto, RegTech, personal finance, payment. So What Fintech has done, products become unbundled, and every Fintech become very focused, very specialized in one. Let me show you the next one, which is very important. This will show you the idea. You know, this CNB Insights, is it okay? Let us see how can we replace Bank of America. If you want to replace Bank of America, a huge bank, global bank, they found around 50 fintechs and digital banks to replace Bank of America. Why? You can see in each area here. Consumer payment, you have 4 banks and four fintechs. If you look here at, look at the last one, business banking. You're going to see a nice purple one called Starling Bank. This is one of the most great digital banks globally. So it's a one digital bank, but where it's only in the business banking because they are pioneering the business banking. So even for a Bank of America to replace, you're going to use some digital banks and some fintechs. And it doesn't mean that you are a bank with 1 or 3 products only, you are small. A Chime in USA, a few years back, was valued $25 billion US. And it only does not have a banking license. They are a fintech app. And I remember I read that in the USA, when they saw the Chime Bank, they got fined. They told me, you're not a bank. You cannot write that you are a bank. You are a fintech company, or you are a fintech, mobile app, or banking app. So here, this shows you is how fintechs unbundled all these services, and you become more specialized, more expert in one area only. Though, because this is not this presentation, but this also brings some drawbacks. I will say it now because I have a longer one to talk about it. But here, what will happen for consumer? You cannot have 15 apps, 20 apps in your mobile to do different services, and you're going to see most of what's happening is a super app concept, marketplace. It's like Amazon. You go in a marketplace, you have everything, and everything could be few banks there. But you don't know is the banks because they are putting your service only. So marketplace, solving the issue of having too many apps. Let us go for the very innovative one, which is the second one here, vertical unbundling. This is a very interesting one and very, I would say, very difficult or very innovative. For any organization to give you financial services, product, they have to have a regulatory license. You cannot, I think 2 things I said, which is people very much care about it, health and wealth. So your wealth, you cannot just go and give it to anybody to trade in it. It happened in some countries like my country and others, and people lost their money. So always you need to know that this is a registered or licensed entity. So the first thing in the ecosystem here for financial services is the regulatory license. The second one, you need to have a processing. You have core banking system, you have software, you have operation team, you have banking people doing the processing in the middle office. And the third one, you have the branches and the share, the channels to sell the product. This is the 3 elements in any financial service product you are offering. And this is the conventional banking. Let me give you an example here. So this card, when I took it from Emirates MBD or Live Bank, I took it from my bank, okay? The name of the bank would Live. But Live, you don't have the license to issue the card. It's issued by Emirates MBD because Live is a new bank for Emirates MBD. So what happened here now, that these 3 layers, 1, 2, 3, will be 3 entities on it. And this is the vertical unbundling. The bank will have the license, another processor will come in the middle, and then the third one will be another fintech. It could be fintechs on top of the bank. The middle one will be infrastructure fintech, card as a service fintech. The above one, it will be a bank, digital bank, or a fintech. I'm going to show an example now. This one in the USA, and you can see people live in the States. You could see easily about the names here. The first one here, the issuing bank, you have Stride, you have Volve, you have Select, WeBank. This is all banking in the States. This is all banks, they have the license. And then you have a company called Mercata, the first one. This is card as a service. You have Stripe as well as a payment company. All these companies, they have the processing, the software. They have the machine to create a card. Look up the user-facing app, the consumer banking or business banking or brokerage or even, a telecom company. They want to offer card for their companies, for their customers, sorry. So these guys they don't need to get a banking license. They don't need to buy a software and all the implementation. All what they have to do, they go to Marketa, and Marketa has the relationship with banks. They issue the card, and what will happen? Revenue sharing. That's why in the era of fintech and innovation digital, you don't do everything by yourself. This is gone. But when you go to a normal bank like Granati or others, when they give you the card, it's everything here done by them. But the agility and the way now forward is to go this model, banking as a service. You know, I was giving a training, you know, 2 years back to colleagues about the same, and I was telling about cloud kitchen. Anybody know cloud kitchen? And someone told me it's a kitchen as a service. I like it. Yes, I said, yeah, right. This is kitchen as a service. I had an app in Dubai, and I ordered food. I like the food, and I went to trying to see this food. What is the restaurant? I know all the restaurants in Dubai. I have more than 25 years living. I couldn't see the restaurant. I went online. I found it's a cloud kitchen. There is no restaurant. It's a cloud kitchen, you know. They are getting everything, all infrastructure there. He do marketing. Cloud kitchen makes the food. He give it. The same way we have here in financial service. So you can watch banking as a service. Open banking, open finance, this is all the new, where it's happening, what's happening now globally. Let me tell you something very important here. Some banks in Europe and UK, they issue banking license only, they don't do anything else. And they become banking as a service only. They don't do bank. They get a license and they start giving this relationship to the two layer above. So for the sake of time, what is the trends? Open banking, embedded finance, and banking as a service. This is you have to watch. This is where we are in today. The bits and pieces will be done by different parties. AI, machine learning for credit. AI, you cannot go to any talk today without talking about AI, machine learning. You know, it's a fact today. So everything is embedded using AI. Blockchain and compliance and transparency. This is a very important thing today. With all what's seeing around us from fraud and so on, blockchain play a big role. I'm just putting some points here because of the time only. And then the digital wallet, buy now, pay later, CBDCs. Buy now, pay later is like, I think it's here as well in Turkey and other. It become a very important, product. Buy now, pay later. Even we have now rent now, pay later. Fly now, pay later. All this is consumer small tickets, which is we never had it before. And this is like a microfinance. CBDC and stablecoin is very important because being in blockchain and crypto and so on, it brought the idea for central banks to start working in something more controlled. So central bank digital currencies and stablecoin. What is the key enabler here? Enabler for fintechs is API first cloud native. And this is very important, by the way. I'm working now in launching a digital bank in UAE. And then the cloud nativity is very important for anything you do. Plus the cloud on the soil, cloud on the country itself become a demand. And regarding digital first customer journey, now what are the challenges? Here, legacy and silos. Most of banks are living in silos and legacy system. Resistance to change, the fragmentation of regulatory. And this is an issue. I'm part of the Arab Monetary Fund Fintech Work Group. For the 22 Arabic countries, for example, when you get a license in any country, you cannot go in the other one, no passporting. And this is what's facing the Islamic fintechs and other. You cannot scale if you are not able to do a license here. At least you don't have to start from scratch in the next country, neighbor country. You need to start at least from the middle. But passporting is an issue here. Now building resilient infrastructure, security, agility, and compliance is a must. Core systems is an issue, so model core system or legacy replacement or modernization of core banking, because this is something we are facing. AI-driven and fraud detection, of course, data. I think Dr. Mahmoud yesterday talked about data governance. I think you cannot talk about AI, machine learning without data. If you know data, no AI. Because AI, like machine learning, ChatGPT, everything is around data. Now the issue you are facing here, data quality and data availability. All of this is very important to do, and having this legacy, I think then we are facing a problem around this one. So the data is become a very important, element to take care. Even some, fintechs are, taking care of that as well. Talk about, this is quickly about centralized. I have 2 minutes, okay? CBDCs and blockchain. I think we talk about it. I think this is a debatable. We can take time talk about CBDCs and central bank digital currencies. This is itself, but the good news, you have in Turkey here the digital lira. In UAE we have a big project. Saudi and UAE, they have also a AlBaraka project. So we have lots of work happen there. I need one only thing from this slide. Embedded compliance security from day one. Partner-driven innovation. As I said, you cannot do everything by yourself. This is over. So now the time to work. Now I think some mindset change in banking. By the way, I've been in SIO in banking for 25 years, or 20 years, sorry. And always, as a CIO, I said, I can do it. My team is there; they can do it. Yeah, but you can do it in 2-3 years. Why don't take it now? So the point now also, the mindset itself change is very important, and I think innovation is more by partnership. And this is the last one. Okay, as I said, this is very important. Financial service landscape. Resilience not just a survival, but adaptive growth through innovation. Really, this is very, very important. It's not to survive, it's to innovate. If you survive only, you die in 1 year. And this is the last, I like to say, okay, it's true. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So let us go far and go together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Mohammed Rushdie. I will not ask my question to give the floor to our audience. So, first question to Mohammed Rushdie. Anyone wants to ask a question, please. Please identify yourself very quickly and only one question. No comments. And Brother Lal.
Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أسعد الله يومكم بالخير والعافية جميعا. سؤالي البسيط هو ما سمعته في هذه الحلقات النقاشية أمر ممتاز، لكن هل هناك إلى الآن نموذج إسلامي ولا سيما في العمل البنكي يعني مكتمل الأركان ومكتمل القيم ومكتمل المبادئ الإسلامية؟ لأنه إذا استطعنا أن نبني نموذج واحد فقط يسهل بعد ذلك تسويقه وتصديره عالميا كمنتج فكري اقتصادي جديد. ما لم نستطع أن ننتج هذا المنتج الاقتصادي الجديد فسنظل في المؤخرة. لكن كيف نسعى أن نصنع نموذج سواء لدولة أو حتى لبنك إسلامي واحد يطبق النموذج الإسلامي الاقتصادي بفلسفته القيمية المتكاملة كما ذكر أستاذنا في موضوع القيم والمبادئ اللي هو توزيع العدالة أو توزيع المصادر بعدالة، المساواة، الرحمة، يعني توزيع الأرزاق، تحقيق الحياة الطيبة التي هي الغاية الرئيسية والاستراتيجية للاقتصاد الإسلامي. الرفاهية، الحياة الطيبة، الاطمئنان، السكون، الراحة، العيش الكريم. فإذا استطعنا أن نتعاون جميعا مع النموذج نستطيع أن نتجاوز المرحلة إن شاء الله.
Thank you. Let's get 3 questions and then I will give the floor to Mohammed.
From here.
Okay, first you got, and then the brother Mohammed.
Assalamu alaikum.
Please be quick because we have.
Thank you for your efforts for Islamic economy. My question: did you think Islamic crowdfunding platform offer alternative to banking funding to support small company?
Yeah, thank you.
So let's do this. Let's get one more question, Brother Mohammed. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. 2 excellent panels, including this one. Thank you. I learned a lot. Well, I was raising my hand when I had a comment, but now I'm switching it to a question just to respond to our good moderator direction. On the issue of fintech and your interesting reaction to your friend that banks are disappearing, perhaps the qualification could be banks are disappearing as we know them because of the issue of the emphasis on the past, on the buildings that you need to really to have a great location and all of that. And that came to mind when the series of fintech festivals in Singapore, when they can establish fully functioning bank within 72 hours.
Yes.
So but the question is basic about the slide, perhaps because of the constraint on time. It's basic about the future of the CBDCs, when you can really have in your wallet directly good connection with the issuer of currency without bothering through the hassle and the transaction cost of the intermediaries. So in some areas of work, if you are not really after banking services, you don't need really a bank. If it is basically about money transfer, better to deal with the central bank directly. So where do you see the direction of that? Because this is very much in the making. Actually, in 10 days, I'll be in China just to know more about this, because their experiment is there for almost a year now, and their experience in some of the governors in the size of big countries in our region. So it's basically about the CBDC and the implications if you have it in your wallet. And then perhaps after the session, moderator, I have a question about the future of ESG, because it's challenged in some jurisdictions. So we take it for granted in many cases.
Why don't you ask that as well, such that we can have?
Okay, so ESG, I was very happy with the intervention from the very beginning of the day that ESG there are indices, there is the new index that's being issued yesterday as well. But you cannot do the same, I'm afraid, if you are crossing toward the Atlantic in the US. It's illegal to use, even in a promotion, that you have an ESG-based product. Of course, you can switch it. I'm sitting in a couple of committees. They were calling themselves until 4 weeks ago, just 4 weeks ago, ESG committees. Now they are calling themselves actually on the title of Sustainability and Resilience Committee. And the indices they didn't change much on the substance. So there is the issue of the substance and the format. So here, perhaps the question about our products is not limited to localities or communities. And what you do if you are basically taking the flight from London, Brussels, or Istanbul, making the same presentation to Texas. So what you will be doing if there is an interest in the discussion, and what kind of alignments between different regulators on that matter, because here we are talking about integrity. If it is the same product, is it an issue of marketing? Is it an issue of substance? What we should really be doing. So this could be getting us into the morality aspect that Professor Asutai mentioning as well. So two questions to the three panelists. Thank you so much.
Let's go with the reverse order. Let's start with the...
Yeah, okay.
If you can just limit your intervention just 1 minute, such that we
I will
can
do
probably
quickly.
get 3 more
CBDCs,
questions.
as you rightly said, it will happen, and it's happening already, especially with China, what's going on with China, Russia, and other countries, which is you are trying to do that. I think the only thing now, corporate or wholesale CBDCs will go fast, while retail CBDCs still there is some kind of privacy and so on. If we're gonna get the CBDCs replacing cash totally, this is where the problem is happening about the privacy and so on, where people will be able to come part of the system, and can the cash disappear? But CBDCs will be there, the corporate one, and with money remittances between banks and individuals as well. And I think what happened with Saudi, it was great between EU and Saudi. They try ABIR, Project ABIR were for the same. And now with the China and Russia and all pushing for that, I think it's going to happen soon in the wholesale one with a very small version of the, of the retail. This is what I see. But it's happening, and I think there is lots of motive. But when and how long does it take to be able to be part of the system, especially retail? I think this will take some time. But corporate, I think wholesale is happening soon. There is one answer to the previous questions, if you want, I can do it in one time.
Very quickly.
For the crowdfunding, I think this was the first model Islamic banking proved to have a good fintech, I would say. In Saudi, we have Lindo, we have many of the crowdfunding platform based on Islamic banking only. And you have in UAE as well. In Malaysia, the first one, Ethis crowd as well for building homes for low income. So crowdfunding was the first product for an Islamic fintech. Thank you.
Brother Mustafa, please the second question.
Of course, and I think Dr. Muhyiddin, you have mentioned the answer in your question in itself, that I think most likely there will be a repackaging of the thing. So will not be led by green or sustainability or ESG. Either it will be, value-based investing. It will be, prudent investing is another one. Resilient investing. These are some of the terms that are utilized. And I think it also reflects back to about, 10, 15 years ago in the Islamic finance industry, when you would structure an investment, you would look at the geography of the investors that you're targeting and do the structuring accordingly. So I remember in my time, many investment firms in Malaysia would structure a different project where they would expect a lot of investors from the GCC to be participating because certain structures were more acceptable in those jurisdictions. So I think that is going to be another case where the industry is going to be, where you are expecting significant capital from US-based investors, you would have to create that packaging accordingly or create a tranche of your investment product accordingly to be able to target that.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Well, that's an important question, in particular the hybrid identities, and within hybrid identities, now hybrid products are emerging as well. And that's a concern, but just to refer, I think Mustafa might correct me, it was 2023 HSBC director, yeah? In charge of sustainability. He thought that the microphone was off. Didn't realize it was 2023, yeah?
22, 23, something like that.
Yeah,
Yes,
and he went into, and the guy is in charge of sustainability, and he went on saying that, these are all rubbish stories. And that's the reality, is when there is no morality directly supporting that, and therefore Professor Muhyiddin referred to. And without having that, just the market conditions determining that we have to be now sustainable, unfortunately is not going to produce, because the initial equation still remains the same. As long as the initial equation does not incorporate other stakeholders, whether human, environment, land, others, it will remain a marketing gimmick, unfortunately, and therefore in different markets we have to create all these different ways of, and some politicians will say, no, I don't want, the other will say, but the moral condition therefore has to come forward to tell us, regardless of whatever the source of that morality. Here we are talking Islamic morality. Pope Francis, amazing morality. He insisted on a particular way how we can connect environment, human, and others. But that morality has to be deterministic factor. Otherwise, it will remain a marketing gimmick, and people like that HSBC director will be running us around, and we'll be running after them with the hope that we can rescue the world. Unfortunately, it won't happen. But we have hope.
I think
we have
also, rather than Arabic, maybe we need to comment.
Very, very quickly.
I can, brother Samai. The question which you ask in Arabic, I think there was Sheikh Salah Kamel, Allah yarhamu, when him and other big scholars, they had the intention to make a big mega bank, Islamic bank, and this maybe didn't go through because he passed away and others. But there is an intention to have a global Islamic bank, and where this could play with the big banks globally. But in the other side, we have different jurisdictions. We have the Malaysia side, we have the GCC, and we have Europe. There is also some changes between the how the model of Islamic banking are being practicing. But in all cases, there is intention to have this, but it's not there today. But I think every jurisdiction or every region is trying to do the best for Islamic banking, and at least it's growing big time, alhamdulillah. Now, UAE, they have recently announced a strategy to double their Islamic finance, Islamic banking assets. So I think we are in the way, but we're still 50 years old only. So I think it will take some time, yeah.
I just want to say, we live in hybrid identities. There is nothing wrong with it. But the hybrid identity is what it results. It gives you the comfort zone. And therefore, it stops searching for authenticity. I think we have to get out of this comfort zone and looking into alternative ways of reorganizing everything around us, including whether it's sustainability, economic governance, all that. I think it is time for healing. Because a lot of, unfortunately, crimes committed against humans, environment, and etc. And that requires alternative ways of looking how the reality can be reconstituted by referring different ontological sources, moralities. But it is time that we have to move into that healing part, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are already over time, but there is one friend here. He was very quickly. Just raise your voice. We can hear you. very quickly. You have 10 seconds.
Finished, خلاص.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. If you see this beautiful picture, it's Ziraat Bank, then the Islamic Ziraat Katlam, and there's Waqf, then the Islamic Waqf. I want to say in 10 seconds, this is the fruit of capitalism. So what I want to today say that there's a calls to go back to the maqasid al-Sharia. So there is the concept of Baitul Mal. Go back to the Baitul Mal concept. And we can go and bring total change with the help of fintech and the experience we have gained in 50 years in Islamic banking. No answer
Inshallah.
required.
Let's take it as a comment. Thank you very much. Our speakers will be here, so you can talk later. Thank you.
Thank you to our moderator and our panelists, as we have done during every single panel. I would like to extend a certificate of appreciation for your participation in this summit. I'd like to welcome again Dr. Fayad Abdul Monam, the chairman of Salih Kamel Islamic Economics Award Scientific Committee, to present these certificates to our esteemed participants of this panel. Right, our first certificate is going to be extended to Professor of Islamic Finance and Economy at the College of Islamic Studies and Program Coordinator of the PhD and MS programs in Islamic Finance and Economy at Hamad bin Khalifa University, Professor Ahmed Farooq Kaisan. Next is Professor of Middle Eastern and Islamic Political Economy and Finance at Durham University, Professor Mehmet Asutay. Our second panelist is the head of Islamic finance at the London Stock Exchange Group, Mr. Mustafa Adil. And last but not least, the Chief Information Officer at Ream Finance, Mr. Muhammad Rushdi. Thank you all very much for that timely discussion. I appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I would like to announce that we're going to have a 45-minute break. It's going to be a lunch break and a break where you all can pray dhuhr. I just want to announce that we do have a masjid available inside the building today. You can go to the masjid that is located on the -1st floor in the building. We do have personnel on the ground that will help you find your way. Thank you.